Topic 1. The actress Ellie Kemper has apologized for taking part in a debutante ball decades ago when she was 19. The ball was put together by the Veiled Prophet organization that has a long racist and sexist history in the St. Louis area. But should a young woman who takes part in a local prestigious social function be held accountable for its long past? In an apology, Ellie says her ignorance isn't an excuse, but are we setting an unreasonably high bar? So to just give you guys and gals a bit of context here. So the Veiled Prophet organization is very, very odd. The more you read into this place, it's weird what the things that they get up to. It's pretty much what happens when white people have just too much money and time on their hands. Uh, so they it's an organization filled with like the elites of the St. Louis area, I guess, right? And they have functions, various functions, right? And they have apparently a parade, and they have this ball, which has some like very odd um,
It's
traditions.
weird.
It's super weird. It's super weird. You just gotta look into
Mhm.
this stuff. But in any case, Ellie Kemper is the actress who was on The Office, is where I know her best from. But now she's also the woman from The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, the main character, right? Um, so she, when she was young, apparently she comes from money, and she took part in this like women's like debutante ball, and now the group is in the spotlight, and the fact that she was part of it, and this organization has a very racist past, and so she's apologized. She had like a message on Twitter saying that she shouldn't have done it and she should have researched and all that. But I'm wondering if that's actually fair to be blaming her for all of this. So, introductions for Boat Jack.
Okay, so I I'm a bit torn because on the one hand, she was an adult when she participated. She was 19. That is young, but in her apology, she also says she makes no excuses. She should have done her due diligence, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, like, how reasonable is it for us to expect people, like lay people, to know this stuff or even know to look into the stuff in the first place? For example, the article that you linked to give us background on this Prime, like links to an article from the Atlantic, and the writer in the Atlantic who published the piece in 2014, and for reference, Ellie Kemper participated in 1999. Um, and even the article in the Atlantic, the author was like, "Yeah, I knew it was the Veiled Prophet Ball. It was called the the VP Fair until the early 90s." Well, like Ellie Kemper wouldn't have even known that it was the VP Fair. So to her, it was just like a fair and with like some weird pageantry and stuff. I mean, sure, maybe it'd be a sign that you should look into that. Maybe, and it is the South, so maybe you should just look into everything in the South. Maybe that's just a good rule of thumb to have at this point. But I never really took any of this as like accusations that she was like in league with the KKK or anything like that, or was endorsing white supremacy by her participation. It mostly just seems like a thing she did, and it's a footnote that it happens to be have like this long like history of, you know, horrible racism attached to it that a lot of people today aren't necessarily aware of. And so I think in a way it's actually good that this came up because now more people know about the Veiled Prophet Ball and know about the historical roots of this, and maybe we can do more to shift away from it.
All right, Amanda.
Yeah, I will agree with everything that Riverboat said. The one issue that I do have is that she didn't take accountability until called out on it, and so I wish that she would have, um, brought attention to this the second that she was aware of these issues, which I don't know when that was, obviously, but I can only assume that at some point prior to this, she knew that there was some history that needed to be discussed.
Okay. There seems to be some sort of background noise. I'm not sure if there's like a air conditioner or something. Oh, it's your. Is it the Your computer?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I'll unplug it to run.
Okay.
It's charging.
Sure. All right. Next, Marcy.
Muted.
Marcy mute. What do you know?
I know a Marcy mute.
Mm.
It's a classic move here on PrimeCayes Amazon Lily panel.
A bold
Anyway,
strat.
okay. So I don't. Yeah, it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how this plays out. All right. So because I was added to this panel like an hour ago, didn't get a chance to read the article. Instinctively, I want to say, people are. I know people because I'm from Idaho, and we have like 12 active hate groups here. It wouldn't surprise me if like I had been to a social function put together by incredibly shady people. That's just kind of how like very like right-leaning rural type areas are. The South is even worse because like it has that history, But that's I mean, imagining like growing up in that area, I imagine it'd be pretty difficult to avoid things that were put on by like the elites of your town or whatever. So in that respect, I do sympathize. I guess from what it sounded like, she kind of like knew about it and like knew that it was a thing that would intrigue people and like didn't say anything about it, which I mean, I guess like when would that come up? But also probably would have been good to spread some awareness about this like horrible organization or whatever. Oh wait.
Yeah. Why don't you take a look at that article? It takes like 2 minutes to read
Yeah,
it. It's like
I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
I saw, but I do know the drama vaguely though because I saw something on Twitter recently that was like someone fucking posting that like she was a former Grand Wizard or like Grand Wizard of the KKK or something, and then people in the comments were like, "Oh, that's based," huh? And like I know that if I were a person who saw like something from my past get dredged up like that, and then like people commenting on it be like, "Oh yeah, that's fucking dope. Like we should have more of that." I'd be like horribly embarrassed to be associated with these people. So I have sympathy, but yeah, I'll take a look at the article.
Good, Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's good that, like, she was like, yeah, this thing has a racist past and, like, apologized for attending it. But I don't know, like, if there's any reason, any fathomable reason one could do, like, come up with to, like, be mad at this person in the, like, current and now. Because it's like, so it's like a combination of things, right? So like I don't know what the organizers of the ball are up to now, right? Because most of the stuff is about their past, right? They were had a racist, anti-Semitic past because mostly they were segregated, right? They didn't allow Black people and Jewish people to attend their balls. Um, I don't. I think it's too high of an expectation. Like someone said earlier, I forgot who it said. All right, because I'm my brain. In 1999, how would you like how would you go about as a 19-year-old, one, having the instinct to like research when someone invites you to a ball, and then also like how do you like do that like pre like in 1999, right? Like it's just sort of like weird to me. Seems like in terms of like her personal guilt, like a non-issue, the what is the actual like topic or like the actual like important thing is like the past of this function and whether or not it's still like is like a segregated space and functions as a segregated space for like weird rich people, right?
You should have researched things on a DSL modem, obviously, right?
For dial-up, yeah.
Grab that AOL.com, baby.
Hell yeah.
Maddie.
Yeah, I'm conflicted with this because I agree that, she was technically an adult, 19, and this is both a group and this like weird annual ritual that has a very racist heritage. However, for a lot of people in the South, so I had a roommate in when I lived in New York who was from Missouri, and she talks about like she was a member of like the Women's League and all of those types of things. And in the South, especially if you're a part of like high society, which it sounds like Ellie Kemper was, given that like she came from a lot of money, it's almost like a social expectation to like participate in varieties like a debutante ball. Sorry if you hear squeaking, that's my dog playing with her toy. Ruby, stop.
Adorable.
But so I get that, like, you know, this maybe isn't just like, oh, she should have known it was racist or whatever, because there's also maybe pressures from like your family to participate in something like this, or just an expectation for the area of society where you're coming from, that like to participate in this. So, I mean, I think it's a good thing that she's come forward about this. I agree with, I think it was, remember Jack and Amanda, who both said, like, I wish she had maybe come clean about this and talked about it earlier. And sort of rather than have it, you know, I think it's always good to sort of control your own narrative, especially when it's something that maybe you're not that proud of, but want to come clean about and want to set the record straight when you know that maybe, hey, this is something that isn't good. And I want to make sure that, you know, should this be uncovered or something, we, I don't know, I want to make sure no one feels betrayed, especially if I'm going to position myself as an ally. So, yeah, but I think this also is maybe an opportunity for a lot of those like similar debutante ball type things, which also, by the way, fucking weird. Just like fucking weird. That's used to be like the debutante ball thing used to be a thing when you like presented all the young ladies who are like of marrying age and like parade them around and are like, men choose a lady, and it's just fucking weird and creepy. So maybe this is a good opportunity for us to rethink like that tradition, just in general, because yikes.
Josie.
Okay, so I too didn't get an opportunity to check into this right away. So I've been doing research, I guess since I got on the stream, taking a look at this. And I guess my first question before I go is, was she being canceled for this before she came out with the apology? I don't understand why this is a topic.
It was blowing up kind of on social media, and people were getting kind of
Mm-hmm.
confused about what it meant. Like, oh, is she supporting the KKK? Like,
So was
It
that
like
before or after her
maybe she was
apology?
getting kind of
Before.
canceled. Like it was some really big, like even like, journalists, activists, whatever, were sharing the story that it came out. I don't know if it was. I think it started where it was like one semi prominent like Twitter person shared a thing between like, did you know that Ellie
Okay.
Kemper da 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 da, and
right.
then it kind of blew up from there.
Okay, so first off, I agree with a lot of panelists. She was 19 years old. 1999 is when this stuff came out. We lived in a completely different time, two decades ago. And Maddie was correct. She was raised in privilege. I mean, she went to Princeton, all of those things, and to be attached to this social elite, like she was attached to that. So I guess I'm gonna go more at the question and point of view. So it's like, should people be held to like accountable? Like, I mean, it's weird because I don't know what we're trying to argue here. I'm trying to jump into the nuance, right? I want to go deeper into the conversation than like this one actress saying, "Hey, these things are wrong," because I think everybody here agrees that they're wrong. It doesn't look like things kind of blew up out of control because she got ahead of it. The articles didn't start coming out about this stuff until 2014. The South is inherently racist. I was a part of that community myself when I was born and raised. So, like there was a lot of things that happened that were probably pretty sketch and that I had no idea I was participating in back when I was younger as well. So I guess the question itself is, how do we frame this question into a topic that leads to interesting conversation? Because I feel like if we have a long time on this conversation, it's gonna get really boring really
So,
fast.
okay, Josie,
So
Josie,
so
Josie. So
so
what I would like
yeah.
to do is expand the topic, not just to talk about this. So, the point was, to use this as a jumping off point to talk about
What
like
is
accountability in general, right? For
Okay, cool.
for
So that's what I
people
need to
with
know. That's what I need to know
okay.
because I need to know what topic am I zooming in on? Is it
Mhm.
accountability or is it like the racism? Like I that's where I'm at. Okay, cool. And I'm not trying to be really icky about like debate
Mhm.
framing and questions and stuff like that. But okay, when it comes to accountability, yes, we need to have a certain level of accountability because it's the only way we're going to be able to grow stronger as a community, to be able to increase our liberties as a whole. I think that when people come out and say, "Hey, I was a part of a cult when I was younger. I'm going to tell my story. Hey, I was in this pageant that was really horrible and wrong, so I'm going to tell my story and so I can now hold those organizations accountable." And I think it's more along the lines of not actually um having her be accountable to her actions, but to future hold all the other people who are involved in this interaction accountable, find out who was involved, who got her in, figure out where those elites are, and then start slowly, methodically finding them and removing them from the way they are doing society. So if that's the grander question from this point, then that's the way that I'm going to go. Okay.
Anyway, so it's something that's been annoying me. Missouri is not the South, okay? It's the Midwest. You keep saying this. It's the Midwest. It's the Midwest, guys. Sorry.
Fair. I didn't realize it was Missouri. I just heard somebody else say it was the South, so I just assumed it was the South.
It's south of me. Missouri's pretty
Listen,
south.
when I think debutante ball, I think of like, oh my stars, I do have the vapors, Mr. Beauregard.
Exactly.
So yeah,
Where
so
I'll be.
yeah, where I'll be.
Missouri-
Like, don't fucking at me about that. All right.
It borders the
I think
South.
of the Midwest as like the furthest south is like Iowa and Illinois, and then like
Same.
up that. Yeah,
No.
I
Yeah.
think Missouri is that weird kind of in between, but I would say it's more
No.
south
I-
than.
I literally looked
No,
it up. I literally looked it up, so I wouldn't make an ass of myself. And it's.
I think if people in Missouri would identify as like.
And they'd be
the
wrong.
South.
It's the mid. Okay.
Missouri.
It's the
Okay,
Midwest.
listen. Missouri
They are.
Missouri is the Midwest in the same way that Idaho is Pacific Northwest. Like we have all the landmarks of the PNW.
Yeah, no,
but
that's
the
right.
culture,
I would say that.
But the
yeah.
culture here is like so much closer to like Midwest culture that it's like living in a different fucking universe from the rest of the PNW. Unless you live right on the Washington border like I do, based. But other than that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like
I don't know.
it's
States are not.
like
The
Midwest
culture
light.
doesn't have. Culture isn't inherently tied to geography. Prime, you
Okay.
fucking ethno-stater over
It's-
here.
All right. Anyway.
It's torn between two worlds. I think we can all identify.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's like the movie Avatar.
Oh.
Am I the only one here? Am
Torn between
I the
two
only one here
worlds.
from the Midwest?
No, I'm
Just
from
like
Minnesota.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
and you just-
I'm from the
I would
deep
consider
south.
Yeah, like
I would
my
consider
fiance's
Missouri
from
the
Minnesota,
Midwest.
and if I told him that Missouri is the Midwest, I know he would make the exact face that Riverboat Jack is making.
It's-
He'd be like,
It's the Midwest. Okay. All right. We'll look it up in a map. All right. So anyway, Joe, please finish us off.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously, I think none of us want to quarter this woman for her past involvement with this organization. But I think to me, what is really interesting about this topic is something I've been thinking about a lot, which is like, when do you become a public person? Obviously, as an actor, she's a public person. But I find in the age of the mixture of like the internet and capitalism, and I really think it started with Gawker, this weird shift of how we tell stories to be about individuals. So there's a big story here. Debutante balls are disgusting and outdated. Debutante balls usually have racist and atrocious histories. Yeah, sorry, Riverboat.
Started with what?
Gawker, the media outlet
Oh,
that really
okay.
changed.
Gawker,
Yeah, that
Gawker.
started
and then
doing,
what is
like,
it? Peter,
Okay.
what's his
I
face,
thought
like
you
sued,
meant
and
someone
they
who
went
like-
out. Yeah,
I thought you meant like the Gorka,
Gorka.
which is part of
Gawker.
Yeah.
GAWCKER.
Okay.
Gawker.
Like
Gawker.
Like Sebastian Gorka.
Yeah, I thought that's
Yeah.
what she meant, but okay.
Yeah.
Gawker.
he's
Got it.
awful,
Gawker?
but no.
Yeah.
No.
Gorka smash. Sorry.
But what I mean is like that sort of started the phase as well where journalists started to have their own Twitters, and it became a big deal to like have the scoop and get a following. And an easy way to do that would be to uncover something bad in someone's past. And then there's something that I refer to as cancellation doulas. There are these people who appear out of nowhere with a big list of errors from someone's past. So if the current transgression isn't cancelable enough, then don't worry, because this person has been doing problematic things for their entire career. So you can cancel them for something. We can agree that it's a pattern and it's problematic, so they should be cancelled. And obviously we need accountability, but this kind of culture creates a situation where you need to be born basically with the right takes immediately. There's no space for growth. And for me, especially like in terms of when I'm an ally in spaces that aren't about me, a big part of that is being comfortable with like being wrong and having someone be angry at me and yell at me and like just accept that it's not about me and I don't get to center my feelings. And I feel like this kind of culture we're creating where it's like, oh, quick, someone's cancelled and that's news, and let's focus on shitting on them and destroying them, creates a space where no one is able to sort of learn in a comfortable environment because they can't do something wrong. I personally don't agree with the take that she should have come out about this earlier, because I want to know if everyone on this panel can think about everything in their past that might be construed as slightly wrong, an association they might have that now they might regret a little bit that they didn't know about. And do they think that they should quickly, before someone else discovers it, list every single thing that might be wrong, especially in this climate, which I know we love to talk about accountability, and I think everyone should be accountable when they do something wrong, but we don't live in a society at the moment that loves to forgive people or help them learn. A lot of the time, one mistake is enough. And in situations like this, she's wealthy, she's got a huge career, fine, she'll survive it. But there are people in more precarious positions that this has real material effect on. And also this kind of culture, like people make a lot of money off getting cancelled. People make a lot of money off cancelling people, and people make a lot of money off getting cancelled. And then suddenly like, I got cancelled. Here's my book. I got cancelled. Suddenly let me be platformed more than ever before. Now I'm a bigger person than I ever was before. For me, the issue is Deb balls and this organization sucks. And while we're sort of talking about that, the main conversation still remains, oh, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt actor grew up as a racist. And it's like, it misses the point. This is a racist organization and a horrible tradition that still fucking exists. What the fuck? Like, that's the conversation. We never get to get there because we're so focused on individualism.
Thank you so much, Joe, for expanding. That's exactly the direction I want to go. I really appreciate that. All right, so let's go to Marcy and Amanda. All right, Marcy's eloquent as
that
always.
Marcy mute.
Pulling that Marcy mute.
That old Marcy, she loves talking to her chat and she loves being muted. Okay, listen, so I completely agree with everything Joe just said. No arguments there. I fucking would have said it myself had I read the article. Having read the article now, let me say, we cannot allow accountability to become a meaningless fucking buzzword like cancel. We cannot do that, all right? If we demand every celebrity or like individual person take accountability, sweaty, for the like fucking horrible shit that they did when they were teenagers. Like, I understand, like, it's good to take accountability in the sense that you like change and become a different person, but expecting every celebrity to like publicly fucking flagellate themselves before something like this comes out is completely unrealistic, and I think like gross and weirdly parasocial. Like, you want to believe these people are your friends and have done no fucking wrong ever in their lives, when in reality, I bet you every single person on this panel has done something like problematic in the past, and like, oh yeah, no, no way. When I was fucking 13, I was like a little edgelord shithead atheist. I was like,
No!
and then my mom sat me down and she had a talk with me, and then I was a feminist from that point on. But fucking, you know, I've been fucking ironically racist when I was in high school. I fucking was religious for a long time and got a lot of weird internalized shit from that. And like, people are the sum of their experience, right? If somebody's raised in a cult, I'm not going, and the cult is like racist and shitty, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, regardless of the person they are now, they grew up racist and shitty. They have to be held accountable for this. Like, no, I don't think we should hold people accountable for the types of upbringing that they have, because, like, I think it's important to consider that, and consider how that might affect their, like, biases and their perceptions and their takes and things like that. But, like, I don't think that we should fucking drag people through the street for shit like that. If she was, like, still supporting them or still giving money to them or in some tangible way, like, still associating with racists, then yeah, sure. But from what I'm reading, this is just an organization that holds social events there. And I agree. I would rather talk about debutante balls as a cultural staple of the United States and the American South, Prime. And the way that like debutante balls kind of encourage this like fetishization of youth that we see in our culture, and this like obsession with fucking owning women and having them like come out and like join the sexual marketplace as soon as they're of age. Like, it's a really gross, archaic medieval tradition. And I agree. It's weird to me that we have to have the conversation about how office woman bad, when instead we could have the conversation about how, like, I don't know, maybe debutante balls should have stayed in the fucking 1850s. You know,
You get like presented by your father as like, all right, here's my property. Like, look how nice she looks. Like this pretty thing.
It's literally
Wanna,
like taking a fucking horse to the market to have people ogle at it. Yeah, it's gross.
I guess I'm just lucky I had a dad who's like a feminist. I was like, Dad, can you present me to society? He'd be like, ew. Like, no.
I saw the new. I saw
terrible.
The new fucking Borat movie where they go to that debutante ball, and like Borat's character of this crazy sexist is like fits in just perfectly fucking well. That's so funny to me. Like, I don't know. It's really gross. Like, it's funny in an uncomfortable way. But...
Yeah. So let's go to Amanda and then Riverboat Jack. But just to be clear, I won't tolerate this disrespect of cartography. Okay, it's a valued industry, and the map. The map says it's freaking
Missouri. I have someone from Missouri in my chat, but they agree with you. They're like, if someone calls us the South one more time, and I'm just like, quiet you.
Simple.
Canceled.
Respect the maps. Okay. All right, Amanda.
It's a very girl boss move to disregard maps.
Okay. All right.
So I'm gonna apologize for the background noise and just try to talk really loud over it.
You're good now.
Oh, good. Awesome. But I wrote up something a little bit before because I'll be completely honest. I think that these conversations, especially for white people, are really difficult to have. And I was kind of nervous that this was going to be the topic of my first panel tonight. And so I'm going to kind of just read a little bit of, so I was able to read a little bit of what I wrote. So I was able to kind of put all my thoughts together. And so like I want to be able to have these difficult conversations that we can grow and learn, but because we all have biases, including racial biases that are in fact racist. So for a lot of people, we are afraid of being seen as racist, which halts conversations and growth. But many people like myself can't confront these biases without dialogue. Yes, I can read, and I have. But often for me, reading itself generates more questions. But I also want to point out that I'm aware that people of color engaging in race talk exposes them to microaggressions that we all bring to the conversation. So while I never have the intent to harm, impact over intent is always what really matters. I also understand that white people being afraid of these conversations isn't just harmful, it's paradoxical. Because while I'm afraid to have these conversations, most people of color just live in fear, period. And so, yes, accountability is really important, especially when harm is caused. Is the bar too high? I'd say it's not high enough, but we do need to allow room for people to change and grow, or nothing will get better. Ignorance isn't an excuse, but we need to understand that not everyone has the ability to educate themselves, nor is even aware that they need educated. Our education system is a failure when it comes to race and America's dark history. Our society is also still highly segregated. So not only aren't we exposed to actual history, we aren't exposed to other experiences until we leave our bubble, whether that be going to college or getting on the internet. But both of those things are also not accessible to everyone. So that's kind of where my thoughts went. And yeah.
Jack, please.
So one of the things that has been kind of overlooked, I think, in the wider conversation about like this debutante ball is that it's not only about like ownership of like your young women, I guess. It's also about ownership of labor. It's also about owning the workers and demonstrating your ownership over them. In fact, the Atlantic article goes into this, that one of the reasons the veiled prophet proceedings were even started in the first place was because the rich people in St. Louis were spooked by the fact that there were interracial strikes going on. There had been a great railroad strike like the year or two previous, and people were afraid because they saw black people and white people working together to better their working conditions. And so that was one of the reasons why the veiled prophet stuff became so like exclusive. It wasn't just because, oh, we hate black people, although that certainly probably played a role in it. I think we can all agree. But it was also like the role of like the racial stereotypes on the floats, the role of like excluding racial minorities and Jewish people from the events itself was to drive a wedge between these groups that had previously been working together. Um, and it was a way to kind of also take back the attention that had been given to like the striking workers and the progressives who were advocating for, things like maybe not doing child labor or having 8-hour workdays.
What?
Stuff like that. I know, disgusting civil liberties.
My God.
I am a libertarian and I oppose this.
and so it was really about ownership in almost every sense of the word, that these members of the elite were entitled to not just their own children but also to the labor and lives of everyone else in St. Louis. And so I think that is like an interesting thing to keep in mind as well, like additional context for us as we continue the conversation.
I would like to step in if you don't mind, Prime,
Oh,
and just ask a
I was
couple
going
of
to say hi,
questions.
first of all. Hi, Johnny, a friend.
Hey.
I'm glad you're here,
Hello,
buddy.
friend.
All right.
Hello.
Well, Johnny's
Good to have
here.
you.
All right,
It's
so
good to be here. I'm sorry, I'm still in stream mode.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So I actually was super interested in this, not only because I was asked on earlier, which by the way, thank you, Samantha, for asking me on. Not only because of that, but because I actually engaged in debutante balls. A lot of people who stream with me and who know me recognize that I did pageants for a long time. I competed in Miss Louisiana twice, which, by the way, the Miss America system is the single largest supporter of or provider rather of scholarships exclusively to women. And that does mean biological women, by the way, which unfortunately is a piece of pageantry that I think is a piece of shit. So, the Miss America system as well as debutante pageants really affected my life. I had a lot of scholarship gaining experiences from those. I learned how to raise money for charity. I learned how to sell AdSense. All sorts of actually really important aspects of adulthood came not from my parents or from any normal established leeway as a southerner or as a American, but through pageants and debutante balls. And so I recognize that there are severely segregationist aspects to these, not only from trans women and women, trans women and cis women, but also historically, racially, of course. Black people were not allowed to engage in the same pageants as white people. There are historically Black pageants in Louisiana as proof of that. And debutante balls in particular have a very insidious history because of their oftentimes, not all of them, but oftentimes representation of more old school and racist realms of thought that actually propped them up. Now, my question is, because I realize that this is in the news right now because the girl who was on, oh God, what is that really good show? It's like
The Office,
Unbreakable
the
Kimmy Schmidt.
Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
Kimmy Schmidt. Oh my god, I love Kimmy
So
Schmidt.
good. Titus Andromedon.
I'm not even surprised that you like Kimmy Schmidt because you are Kimmy Schmidt.
Yeah,
buddy.
closest one here.
Like
definitely.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm Kimmy Schmidt if she like, you know, lived in New York for a few more years and like got hardened.
hell yeah. But Kimmy Schmidt, the woman who played Kimmy Schmidt was actually in one of these debutante balls, like I participated in as a child. And the history of this particular one is extremely racist. However, you have to understand she was going to an Ivy League school. She was paying for all sorts of ridiculous things like, you know, trying to become an actress and things like that. Is it an onus on her? Is it her responsibility as a teenager to not take these scholarships because of the history of this? Was it my responsibility as a person who wanted to raise money for college to not participate in the Miss America program because historically pageants have excluded Black women? Or is it the case that some of these, at least, organizations that are offering these opportunities to show your talents and to learn things that are very important for streaming, by the way, like public speaking and how to raise money, is it the case that in modern times, many of these organizations actually are important and have real utility in the lives of young American women? So is it both? Of course it's both, but I would love to hear some more of you guys' opinions on it.
All right, let's go to Marcy, then Joe.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not going to mute myself this time. Look at this. I'm making money moves, not even muting myself.
Damn, that's progress.
Yeah, I know. Damn, I'm a professional streamer, guys, okay? Here's the reason I work in a grocery store. Okay, so, Okay, I understand that institutions as they exist right now, be they problematic or whatever, have utility on people's lives, right? I don't think that the conversation here, and this is what's so fucking frustrating to me about the whole like cancel culture narrative or whatever. I really wish this wasn't a conversation about like, should we hold her accountable for her involvement with this evil organization? And rather, is there a better way we could do what this organization does for young women without having like archaic traditions that are extremely fucking misogynistic and gross, you know? Like, these organizations might serve utility, but I think if that's the case, we should tear them down and replace them with better organizations, or like change the way they operate in some way so that like people can still get help with their education and still get help like pursuing their dreams or whatever, but not at the cost of like their humanity in a debutante ball, or at the cost of fucking potentially having it dredged up later, or the cost of supporting with their money and their application fees like these racist shitty institutions. So I wish that this wasn't a personal responsibility conversation that we have to fucking have, because everyone in this country, even the liberals, are obsessed with personal responsibility and bootstraps morals, you know?
Yeah.
I firmly believe we should be hard on institutions, easy on people. I think
That's good.
Yeah, I would really love to know like what the humanity cost is, we think, of these debutante balls as a person who greatly benefited from pageants, but I know that we're going to Joe.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I don't think that it like makes you less of a person. I feel like that might have been a weird phrasing on my part. I feel like they debutante balls, like as a concept, the way they're done, are in conflict with the idea that women are human beings equal to men. I think that they dehumanize women as like broadly. I don't think that you're less of a human for participating in them.
Yeah, I realize that. Joe, what was your comment? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I mean, okay. Johnny, you know that I love you. And I spent my opening statement talking about how personal accountability is such a distraction from the larger conversation. But in terms of the points you made about debutante balls, of course, the same arguments can be made for prison. It teaches you good skills. The same arguments can be made for private schooling. You get particular skills. Things have to have utility in order to continue. But the utility that you're talking about, based on the racist history of these things, is a utility that has historically been offered to a particular group of people, and that's problematic. And And part of that problem as well, right, is you're saying, oh, you know, she wants to go and pursue her acting career. I'm someone in that industry, and I think a huge problem, a lot of people on this panel talked about how exposure to different ideas, to different people is really important for growth. Unfortunately, unless you're rich, middle class at the very least, it is very difficult to be successful in the entertainment industry because you have to spend a lot of time with no money. So unless you have safety nets around you, it's almost impossible in the long term to be in the entertainment industry. So perhaps part of the problem is that we have opportunities that are going specifically to white people to allow them to have safety nets that aren't going to other people, which creates an environment where white people do get to be writers and actors and performers and tell their narratives. And so there is no broadening of ideas. There is no ability for people to be exposed to things and learn from them early. So while I appreciate that Deb Balls offer scholarships and Miss America offers scholarships, anything that seeks to survive in our modern economy will need to have some sort of utility that allows them to save face. But just because something has a benefit doesn't mean that it doesn't have a harm.
So
Respond, Johnny. Yeah.
are we talking about the harm of, we're getting a little bit of feedback from somebody. I don't think it's me. There we go. It stopped. So are we talking about, I really want to know, is this a conversation about, or it can be both, obviously, but is this a conversation about the history of some of these pageants and debutante balls being racist? Or is it a conversation about the entire institution or the entire process of pageantry, wherein, admittedly, yes, people are judged based on their physical ability, based on their speaking abilities, based on their grades, based on their ability to show a talent in front of an audience in many cases. That's specifically Miss America, not Miss USA, but that's a minor issue. Talent is something that, of course, has to be taught and oftentimes comes with very expensive lessons. There is an element of physical grading that can often be highly exclusive. Obviously, we've never seen someone in a wheelchair on the Miss America stage. These are all things to be taken into account. And so I'm wondering, are we almost getting distracted by the idea that some of these are archaic institutions, like previously some of these pageants and debutante balls excluding and being racist in very overt ways? Or do we have more of a problem with, and are we trying to attack and move into the new pageants as well? Because not every pageant started in the 1950s.
So
a lot of them
Yeah.
started right now.
Joe, you can
So
respond.
I don't think you
and
can
then we'll go to
divorce
Amanda.
them.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah.
I think you've highlighted. I don't think you can divorce the two. I think something that has discriminatory origins will always have levels of discrimination involved. Outside of the discrimination, whether that be through judging or through the access to the resources required to compete, I think that Deb Balls, and I'm sorry, I know you got a lot from them. I don't mean to sound like I'm attacking you. I don't like what Deb Balls and pageants represent. I don't like what they have to say about women. Yeah. I don't like the way, and that's coming from someone who will watch something like Miss Congeniality and be like, maybe I will dress up. No, I don't like what they represent. Holistically, I don't like what they say about women. I think there's a net harm caused by pageant systems and Deb Balls to women.
So we'll move on to Amanda, but I'll say that we months and months ago, closer to when this channel was starting, we had a conversation. I'm not. I think it was on the open panel, or at least maybe it started on Lily, then it went on to the open panel about pageants and their place in society. And holy crap, was that contentious! Holy crap! We can try it again if you want, but it was super contentious apparently. All right.
Be willing, yeah, that'd be cool. But
Okay,
yeah, Amanda,
please.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I also don't want it to feel like I'm attacking Johnny Scarlett as well, but I feel like that argument was pretty much an argument on why we should uphold white supremacy. And you, Joe said, you can't
question,
really.
not an argument.
What was that?
It was a question, not an
Oh,
argument.
sorry. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So then I guess I would say that to answer the question is no, we shouldn't continue these because they do actually uphold white supremacy, which is institutionalized racism. And we can't separate the issues in regards to the people that participate in these because in order to stop them, we have to have the people not only stop funding, but stop participating and taking advantage of these opportunities. So while I'm always for attacking systems as opposed to individual people, there is that accountability tied to it. And I think that, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, let's go to try Marcy. Sorry, actually, let's go Jack first, then Marcy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things is I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with like fashion shows or like um going out to dance or whatever, these social events. I don't think there's anything wrong with that inherently. What I think is wrong is like the history and social connotations that have kind of come with that context. And so I think that a really good way of going about this, where like we can still have fun events, we can still have cool fashion shows or whatever, or it would just have to be something that is undertaken with the aid of like all parts of the community, all parts of the audience that would be attending these shows and these balls. And so frankly, I think the best course of action would be to just completely dissolve the Veiled Prophet organization, completely dissolve these organizing groups, and reform them using, instead of just like members of high society who are picked in secret in order to choose a secret veiled prophet who will decide on the next queen of love and beauty. Like, no, get rid of all of that and just like grab like the leaders of your community and have a collective agreed upon consensual event. And I think that that would solve the vast majority of problems here.
All right. So let's go to Marcy, and then Maddie, then we'll go back to Johnny.
Can we stop talking about fucking talent shows and pageants and like fashion shows and shit in the same breath as we talk about debutante balls? That feels weird to me. They're very, very different institutions. Debutante balls like directly enforce the idea that like a woman is an object to be owned by men. Pageants, I mean, they might enforce some like weird beauty standards or whatever, but comparing the two is kind of weird.
No, I feel like it's similar. I feel like it's very
pageants,
similar.
okay, listen,
Agreed.
it's similar in ways, but fucking I like if we're talking about like can we still do pageantry? The answer is, well, you know, maybe it could be made into something that's a little bit less harmful. But if the conversation is like, should we still do debutante balls? I'm gonna come out and just say no. I think debutante balls are really fucking disgusting, and the fact that they still happen today is kind of gross to me. Like, we have all these fucked up ideas about how like a woman is her father's until he gives her away to her husband that are instilled in our society through like years of fucking Protestant religious values and fucking conservative traditions or whatever. And I don't think that there's a reason to uphold these just because sometimes like white cis women benefit from them. You know, I like it's great that white cis women benefit, but I wish they could benefit in a way that didn't enforce these horrible fucking ideals about womanhood in general. It's harmful to everybody. And I don't think you can divorce like the racist history of an organization from its present day in the same way that you can like the racist history of a person, because an organization it, like has many people involved. There's a lot of nepotism in some of these organizations. There's bound to still be an element of that like past tradition, you know. So something like Veiled Prophet, it's in my opinion kind of silly to be like, oh well, yeah, they were racist in the past, but like this is now, all right? Because like until trans women and black women and white women and big booba and little booba and fat and skinny women and all of the women have an equal opportunity to compete in these things and to benefit from these things, they're not fucking fair and they're not providing enough utility to warrant keeping them around despite the like apparent social harms that they do.
Also, let's ungender these events.
Oh,
Oh,
boy.
that too. Men's pageants. Let's get some fucking dudes out there, all right? I've been on like a man kick lately. I don't know what it is. I've been, the pheromones have been in the air. I've been all about the men lately, all right?
I
I want to see
apologize.
some femboy and bear pageants, all right? I want to see some shit. Let's
Okay.
get this
Okay,
going.
Love
so
that.
look, I think we might have an
That's the
honest
dream.
to God argument here, which is very interesting. Okay, let's go to
Oh, what's that,
Maddie.
Prime?
First, Maddie is first. Maddie and Johnny.
Yeah, real smooth. But yeah, I mean, I think, when I think about utility of these, because I think Johnny has a good point that, for a lot of women, especially in areas where maybe there aren't other activities or like venues for them to learn things like public speaking, like how to be poised and present yourself and to talk. And I think like, because those are things that even now when I meet some teenagers, I'm just like, you need a public speaking class because my God. So like, but I think there are so many other ways that could happen, and maybe it takes an investment on whether it's like the government's part, whether it's like different organizations that sort of fill that void where it doesn't have to come from this archaic institution where, I mean, women are essentially like, yes, you're judged for talent and other things and you're speaking, but like at the end of the day, it's called beauty pageants for a reason. And that beauty is typically like through the lens of a white, like straight Protestant lens. Like that's the frame, how it's framed, and it's like that's inherently problematic. I also think that like when they talk about like talent, because I agree, like it's so good to have an outlet or some sort of like creative thing that you can work towards and improve on. Like that is great, but also there's like, I hate that the vision that in a lot of these pageants of what constitutes a talent like worthy of competition, it's all like either dancing or singing or like performance. Yeah, and that's it. And it's like, but is that all we see is like that are like talents that women can have that are worthy of like being showcased? Because like it makes me almost feel like that's why it's hard for me to decipher or like separate debutante balls from beauty pageants, because I guess in my mind I see it as like they're taking out like women to be like show ponies, and they're like, show your fun trick, show pony, like look at what we painted, we brushed your beautiful mane and you look so pretty, and like then you and like
And often those
it,
standards are patriarchal, like that.
yeah,
The
and I'm like,
standards for
And
these
I want to be like,
that's
fuck you
why I
guys.
don't.
Like, we're so much more talented than that bullshit. And you know what? Even if you are talented with that shit, like, it's still like you're being judged through such a narrow lens and of judgment. And it's like, like I want you to be able to get those skills and experiences without the garbage that comes with it.
Yeah. People to be able to dance and paint on stream and stuff like that. I want people to be able to do those things without having to pay exorbitant amounts of money for them. First of all, that's the first problem that I can see in this system of problems. I want to make a few points based on what everybody has said so far, because this is such a near and dear thing in my life. First of all, the debutante ball that I actually went to and participated in when I was in high school was a modern debutante ball. It was a series of yearly pageants wherein at the end, if you had participated all 4 years of high school, you were in the running for a very large scholarship. And I ended up winning that scholarship. And we had girls who were disabled, and we had girls of all races that lived in my particular area. It was actually the most inclusive pageant experience that I ever had. And that's because it wasn't an older debutante ball like this one that we're talking about. It was one that is based on the ability of women to gain scholarship and to show that they are, talented people, but that was created post racial segregation, first of all, which is like a big thing in pageants. So that the organization that is individually responsible for these pageants has to be taken into account. The second one that I'll make is that national organizations are the actual Illuminati. Motherfucking Miss America, Miss USA, which is a beauty pageant, and Miss America is a scholarship pageant, by the way, as ironic as that is. National organizations are the actual Illuminati, and one of the main reasons that Halle Berry is so famous now is because she was one of the first Black Miss America contestants, and it was a huge upset because it was the 1980s, and people, by and large, who were white and Protestant in America didn't fucking want that, so they complained. It was a huge deal, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't actually think she participated in the national pageant, but I could be wrong. So national organizations like Miss America and Miss USA are absolutely the Illuminati. They are the exact thing that you're talking about, but not every debutante organization that has been created with the express purpose of giving money to young girls is the Illuminati or racially segregated in any of its history. So I wanted to make 2 points really quick. The inclusivity of bodies and sexes in these particular types of competition still mean that you are making a competition based on brain ability, minds, grades. This is still a competition that is exclusive to people. There is a slippery slope argument here that I would love to hear somebody have an opinion against. Like, how is this not a slippery slope? Because my brain goes to, okay, no matter how many people you include, Mr. Chu, please stop. No matter how many people you include, when you choose a winner for these competitions, you are still excluding people to not receive scholarships based on some sort of ability. And so where do we draw the line is really my real question. Also, the last point that I'll make is that, yes, a ton of the things that you are graded on, like how nice your hair looks and how good your makeup looks and how appropriate your dress is, all of these feed into, not only racially, but just in general, they feed into responsibility politics. And so we do need more alternative pageants, and we do need more men's pageants. A lot of them exist in the college sphere, of course, because men are more likely to do something just for scholarship and not because they want to look pretty. All of these things lead to responsibility politics. And so at the end of all of this, I'm thinking, should we just get rid of all of this competition altogether?
Oh,
So
man.
I would love to hear what Joe thinks.
So yeah, I'll go to Joe
make,
and Jack.
public college free, and then you don't have to do that to get money for college.
Well, I'll go to Joe
Maddie,
and
that makes too much sense.
I'll go in Joe and
Sorry,
Jack.
sorry
But
for bringing sense into this. I'll leave.
Based Maddie
I just
again.
want to say that Johnny, like, we might have to have a separate conversation because I'm willing to be the bad guy here and have. I don't know. We have enough time for it, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I take no issue with competition, especially a competition that encourages talent and working on skills. I do take issue with any competition that promises a scholarship at the end that has beauty as a central marking component. It doesn't matter whether they accept people of all appearance, of all ability, of all race. You cannot disconnect beauty from racist and sexist origins. So long as beauty maintains, and also it perpetuates the idea that women should be rewarded for upholding beauty standards that are traditional, as you said, respectability politics or responsibility politics. So as far as I'm concerned, give women as many scholarship competitions as you want. That's fine. Don't make beauty a core component.
But okay, let's go, Jack.
What? Say it. Say it.
Yeah.
Say it.
Just
Do
say
we
it.
have
Like, make the
time?
conversation.
Hey, Prime, I'm ready for this fucking like atom bomb of misogyny you've been promising
No.
to drop since my fucking
Yes,
opening. All right, let's hear it.
Let's
Let's hear
do
it.
Because
it.
you're all like, oh, just say it.
Ready for
Make the
it.
conversation
Go.
interesting.
The crowd wants blood. Okay, give them blood.
Look,
They have bloodlust.
well, I guess the conversation, it depends on what you want from the conversation, right? Like if you think that we should have pageants at all, if you think that the whole idea, right, from start to finish, it has no utility at all and we should get rid of them, period, well then I guess that's the end of it, right? But if you think that we should have them, like Joe just said, like that competition
I said you can have competitions.
I've heard you.
I didn't
I've heard
say
you.
you can have pageants.
I okay, so I've heard you, but you're saying like if you're gonna have them, then get rid of the beauty aspect, and it's like, well then that's a completely different thing. Like it's an entirely different thing, right? And if you want to do that thing, sure, why not, right? I support it. That sounds like a lot of fun. But on the other hand, if, like you said, we can't divorce beauty from that, and oh boy, it's another conversation.
I want to
Hey,
insert this
Prime.
into the
Hey,
conversation.
wait, hey, Prime.
What?
Do you think that women who more effectively fit into a cis white male's lens of beauty should have the more opportunity than women who don't fit that lens?
No.
Like, is that a principle that you hold?
Why would I hold that?
Okay.
No.
Really
But-
quick, I
Well,
want to insert
that
this
has
into the
nothing to do-
conversation.
Right.
There is an element that you guys are missing because you're using hyperbole that actually more accurately represents what these pageants end up being rather than their intended and stated goals. Their
Intention-
intended and stated goals. I realize that intention and utility are two completely different things. I'm not, a stupid person. But what I want to insert into the conversation is that their intended and stated goals are very close to what Joe actually is describing. They are not beauty pageants in the case of Miss America. They are scholarship pageants. Now, we end up crowning a lot of people who do fit that cis normative, usually white, hetero standard. But the intention is not that. It's generally to provide almost a Disney-esque quality of a model citizen, and to promote that person on a national and international stage so that women can have role models. That's the idea behind it. And so, yes, the Miss America system does a piss poor job at doing that, but the actual intended goal is very much closely related to what we're saying would not be a bad thing, or at least what Joe said would not be a bad thing.
The intention of prisons is to rehabilitate.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know that I even
Yeah.
I don't know that I even like that stated goal, because this kind of Disney-esque, picturesque, like portrait of femininity and innocence or whatever that they're trying to crown, that is also like the high grades. Like, this is like a very hard concept to divorce from its origins and to divorce from the way people still see it. So I agree with Joe. I don't think that these things can be separated.
Yeah.
So there's potentially in a vacuum a way to do this neutrally, but not in our current society.
Let's go to Jack, and I can interject some other time if you guys want to hear it. But go ahead, Jack, please.
So I guess one of the questions is, and Maddie kind of hit on this earlier, but like, what is the actual intention that we want to achieve? Like, do we just want to have like fun community dances? Because we can do that and we can get rid of like the baggage and like of misogyny and like racism from like groups like the Veiled Prophets or like the institution or social institution of debutante balls, and we can form a different thing that where people just get together as a community and dance. That could be really fun. If it is more that we need outlets to fund women to get into college, then I think that's that's a really more of a better argument that we have really piss poor ways of getting women into college and that we need better ways of distributing funds. And a really good way to do that would just be to make public college free for everybody. And then if the other object, which Johnny kind of brought up here, is to like create like model citizens, I kind of take umbrage with that one just because I think that I think that there is an aspect of white supremacy to upholding beauty standards as they currently exist, because that is typically the beauty standard that has been colonialized and like pushed across the entire face of the planet. And I think that we should do something, and it can start locally, to start to dismantle those ideas of what beauty is. And to kind of Joe's point, that doesn't mean we have to stop doing competitions. We can still have like competitions regarding like fashion outfits or something like that, or like we can have competitions regarding different skill sets or whatever within different communities, and that would be perfectly acceptable and fine. But I think that there's a big difference between applying a subjective beauty standard as like an objective thing. And I think that becomes a problem when you hold it up as an objective fact of the world.
Go ahead, Josie, and then Marcy, please.
So, obviously queer balls do it the best. There is no like it's about just celebrating yourself, who you are, like it give me that realness, that type of stuff, and we celebrate that, and there really isn't a lot of things. What I don't like about it, and Johnny, I'm gonna use you as an example, is the high stakes nature of not getting to be the winner. And the fact is, like, there were possibly women that were a part of those debutante balls that didn't win and maybe didn't have the access to go to college for that. And I don't like that it kind of puts people into boxes to like be like, I need to do this, or it's my career on the line, or it's my school on the
Mm.
line. And I hate that level of competition because it puts women against women in a way that is
Mm.
very vicious that already exists in society of like, oh, she's prettier than me, so therefore she gets more things, right? Which is a very huge representation in the pageant culture. And
Mm.
I do think that we can have like pageants, we can have balls like the queer balls and things like that where we go and we have fun and it's just a celebration. Oh, I'm gonna look cute today, or things like that where there's no stakes, there's no losers. It's just you go in and you have fun and we all celebrate each other's unique beauty. And I think that that's the way that we could change the definition of what these pageants usually be, because it puts such
Mm.
a high stake on it. So that's one thing. And yeah, so I think that if we were to like Maddie said, like, let's make education for all of us so we don't have to have these random competitions for with other women where they become vicious at each other so they can go to school. Like it's not great. And I see PrimeCayes' face of disappointment here with my
No,
It's
no, no.
not
response, but
disappointment. Sorry, not disappointment. Please continue.
yeah, but
Contemplating.
contemplating and
Yeah.
disagreement. But yeah, that's kind of how I look at it, is that America's put too high of a stake on this stuff, and I think that's
Mm.
where it becomes dangerous.
So,
And let's be clear, when I was competing at 17 and 18, I was competing against girls who were 25 to 27 who were trying to pay for medical school and law school. This is the main
Holy shit.
demographic of these pageants.
so okay. Let me ask a question to try to expand this then. Jumping off what Josie said and what others have brought up, right? Talking about the fact, like mostly the prize. It seems like the prize is the issue here, right? Because the prize is that you have money to fund your education. Okay, so we have college for all. Let's say that happens tomorrow, college for all, so that's over. Do you think there would not be any more of these pageants? Would that be the end of that? That if they simply turned it to, for instance, just like a cash prize, right? If other material needs were met, right? And I guess the stakes weren't quite as high as Josie was referring to, but if the material needs were met, would women just say like, "Well, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore"?
No.
What do you think? Let's go to
Yeah,
let's go to Marcy and then Jack, please.
I think that we're making the mistake that I find that like myself and others sometimes make on these like Twitch panels when we talk about things, where we think about them in a vacuum, where like this question that you just phrased to me just now is or to all of us, I guess, not, it's a little narcissistic of me. The question is like, if we had a society where everyone's basic needs could be met and they wouldn't need to compete like this for those things, then would women do it? Then would it be acceptable? And my opinion on that is that like it's good to think about these questions maybe if we're like trying to suss out the actual ethicality of like an issue in and of itself, but I don't think that we can like kind of entertain this conversation about like, is this good in a hypothetical perfect society, when currently the society we live in has issues with both like the prize, like you said, which is a part of it. If the prize is you get to go to school or you get to further your education or something, then it's kind of it's a little sussy, because like if the people who don't win are kind of screwed in that situation. But I mean, whatever, like I know I want to stress also that like, aside from the prize, I think another big issue is that regardless of what the competition is about, whether it's about like straight up beauty or whether it's about like being a model citizen or whatever, the winners of these contests are usually, because we do live in the society that we live in, determined by that kind of like white hetero cis beauty standard, you know, like, and even if the competition is something that's not about that, it usually comes down to like, you know, we all know the meme, right? The pretty white Southern girl that gets all the opportunities in the South or whatever. So it's fucking like, I don't know. I feel like when we have these conversations, we have to think in terms of the society we live in right now, or else we're just going to be stuck in this endless, like, philosophical loop of, like, well, would this be good in this society? Well, would this be good in this society? It's all well and good, but maybe we should talk about pursuing those societies, you know?
So I agree, philosophy bad. All right, so let's go to Jack and then Joe.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Oh, Joe, you look so traumatized.
Such a bad take.
But yeah, to just like build on that point a little bit, like, you know, and bring it maybe a little bit more home, like holding up these beauty norms, these beauty standards, like it permeates all of our society. Even our internet culture is full of it. Like you can like you all the way from like the beauty queens on like YouTube who have somehow 60 million followers on their YouTube channel. Like holy shit, those channels are huge. All the way down to like incel communities where they talk about Chads and Stacys and talk about, you know, all of these people have internalized these beauty standards for themselves in a variety of different usually negative ways. And so like maybe moving away from this institution is a way that we can actually start helping the world to heal and help people to embrace their own standards of beauty in a way that is helpful and constructive. And we can evolve the idea of like beauty pageants in general. You know, turn them into fun community building activities that don't exclude people. Turn them into competitive activities that aren't based on like these super subjective standards. And maybe that would actually help like culture heal a little bit from colonialism. I don't know.
But that's not a beauty pageant.
Wait,
That's
do you
not
mind if I say
No.
one thing?
But that's not
Yeah,
a.
let me say one thing to
hold on,
Jack
hold
really
on.
quick.
Wait, I just want to get this out. This is the thing. It's not a beauty pageant.
It is.
No, it's not.
It is.
It's not a. It's
It
not
is.
A, if it's okay. If it's
but
not
wait,
judged.
what's
no,
not a beauty
it's what
pageant?
Marcy, it's what Josie brought up before, right?
Okay.
So like queer balls, queer pageants, it's a different kind of beauty. So just because it's not standard patriarchal beauty doesn't mean that there's not makeup, there's not looks, that you're not projecting a realness or a look. You're not creating something based on beauty. You're not, you know, finding your realness. It is different to standard, like, oh, okay, here is my winged eyeliner and my perfect soaped brow, but it is definitely still beauty.
That's okay. So that's not what Jack referred to. Jack. I was replying to what Jack said. But
I'm confused. I'm confused about what you're objecting to, Prime.
Okay,
to be
so what
100%
you described is like, well, let's turn it to something else, right?
Yeah.
And it's like it's a community standard thing, or like I don't know, like the things that you
community dance.
Yeah, community dance or something like that, right? And that was in terms of debutante balls, but the one or the other, like that's not the thing, right? So we can turn to something else, which is fine, great. Like these sound like positive things, right? And those queer balls, I am familiar with them, and they actually seem like a lot of fun. But like if we're talking about beauty pageants, right? And if they're going to be a thing, again,
so my stance was that they should evolve into either obsolescence and be replaced by a new brand of competition that is based on not beauty, which is kind of what Joe was talking about earlier. And we can have competitions. They would just be a different kind of competition.
I agree.
I think
Yes.
what Prime was asking though is, will beauty pageants still exist in an area or in a society wherein all of these needs are met? And the answer is yes. Please look at bodybuilding competitions. Bodybuilding competitions are not based. Bodybuilding competitions are something that are not based on need. They are not based on something that is generally a societal standard, because muscular women are generally actually seen to be unattractive, and lots of people who are at the top levels of these competitions actually get death threats because people find them to be quote unquote ugly. These are competitions wherein needs are not met, but people are still drawn to them because they want to compete in something they care about. So this is an example of what Prime was actually asking is, will these pageants still exist in some form if needs like college education and shit like that are met and we're not competing for those needs?
Yeah, and my argument is that I think that if we were able to evolve past these arbitrary beauty standards, that society would improve quite a bit.
Cherry about an objective standard of muscular development.
Okay.
That's not how.
Mm,
I
That is
feel like
how-
Girl
that-
Boss
that
already
is
kind of
how
just
the-
addressed this and went
No.
why this is in a vacuum type thing.
Yeah, well, I just wanted, I just.
Oh, fine. Go ahead, Marcy. Then we'll go to Joe.
It would be a
Okay.
weightlifting competition.
So the reason that weightlifting, or the reason that like bodybuilding competitions and queer balls and things like that are based, all right, here's the distinction, right? In a bodybuilding competition, you're measuring like the work of art that you're making your body, right? The amount of muscle you're able to gain, the amount of weight you're able to lift. In queer balls, because queer subcultures are very focused on like people's individuality and like serving realness, whatever. I'm not. I'm not super. I used to be into the drag scene, but not so much anymore. But like they fucking they're super based, right? Because that beauty standard is like actually like the makeup and the clothing and the things that you use to enhance beauty, right? I think that as long as our society exists with this beauty standard that is like culturally informed and like problematic in and of itself, these institutions will be problematic. I don't think that we should have beauty pageants as we currently stand right now, because in this current society, we aren't going to have like massive queer balls where all the fucking boomers and like old white people come in and celebrate the young brown trans women or whatever. Like that's just not gonna, I mean, maybe on like a Netflix show, but that's not gonna happen right now. People are fucking, the society that we live in is too informed by the cultural biases of the past. What we need to focus on is normalizing a wider spectrum of like acceptable beauty standards and kind of destigmatizing bodies that look different from what we are told is good. And the way that we do that is through media and education, and exposing people to this from a young age so that future generations can enjoy beauty pageants without them being this horrible, problematic, ghoulish institution that they currently are.
Okay, Joe, please.
Yeah, I think you make a really interesting point, Johnny, in that like if we take the competition element out and all the needs are met, then a lot of the arguments you made for beauty pageants also dissipate, right? The idea that there's scholarships, etc. Would they still exist? Of course, because women from a very early age are valued for their appearance. If a woman is conventionally attractive at a young age, this is quickly reiterated to her whenever a girl is pretty, that is communicated to her, and social worth comes a lot from appearance. For trans women, I assume that looking pretty and passing, when that happens and you get compliments for that, I assume that feels like social worth as well. So appearance for women across the board is viewed as something that is socially valuable. So yeah, I think it would continue. The question is, are beauty pageants an end product to that, or are they something that contribute to that continuing culture of beauty being this socially valuable ideal? If we get rid of beauty pageants, does that help us move away from beauty as something which is socially valuable for women? Or do we need to move away from that before we can eliminate beauty pageants? I personally think it's easier to get rid of beauty pageants than it is to deconstruct a deeply ingrained historical tradition of valuing women for their appearance.
Okay, that's amazing, Joe. And you're getting closer to what I was trying to discuss there. In that, yeah, these people, humans like pretty people. This is the thing, right? We like pretty people, value pretty people. We can say that they shouldn't do that, but they do that, right? So within that mindset of, human society, right? Not a utopia, which I wasn't trying to paint, but not a utopia, right? Well, then people are going to want to look at pretty people, and then some of them are going to use that to their advantage, right? Attractive people will use this to their advantage. And part of that is having a competition in which I am the prettiest, right? Everyone says I'm the prettiest, and so I am the prettiest, and I get a crown or whatever, right? And there's a prize. It doesn't have to be a college scholarship, because it's fucked up that we don't pay for that. But it can be something else. So I think it would still exist beyond that.
I gotta say something too.
Let me finish first.
Yeah.
But I think it would still exist afterwards, right? And understanding these things are ingrained, right? And you could, and I feel like this is like, I'm imagining someone who is not a leftist, like watching this, right? And understanding some of the takes, right? Like this, like, what seems to be an anti-competition take, that like once some people are going to win and some people are going to lose, right? Like that's the thing that's going to happen. And to say that, well, it sucks that it's exclusionary because there's a winner that's crowned and other people feel bad. Well, that's kind of what competitions are. You win or you lose, well, and you can be judged for all kinds of accesses, right? And you can say some of these other things that you can be judged on are more positive than beauty, sure, okay, but still within a competition, that's just how it works, right? And so if beauty is something that we value, you can say that's unfair, but if beauty is something that humans still value, right? Just like we value athletic ability, right? If that's still going to be a thing, then beauty pageants are still going to be a thing, and women themselves are going to want to compete in them. So let's go to Josie, and then is it Marcy?
Okay, I have to attack your value of pretty. Everybody in every sense is pretty to somebody. And the way that I look at it is, if it was a panelist full of queer people who like drag aesthetic, then the definition of pretty is going to be very different than like what the debutante ball is going to be. The issue is, Prime, is the fact that there is no like set standard of what is pretty, and therefore the prettiest wins, because therefore if you have that standard, then you have a standard for ugly, and that is not something that actually exists, right? The fact is, pretty is in the eye of the beholder, and the fact is, society and a lot of people who have privilege are the ones trying to define what pretty is. Look at your local TV commercial and you'll know what that standard really is. So it's a very dangerous road to walk when you say people are just winning because they're pretty and the prettiest person wins. That's the issue with that. I think a lot of us women here are having with that idea, because that objectification of what is pretty makes other women feel bad for not being as pretty. So the fact is, it's not about being pretty, it's about winning a competition. It should be, I'm not saying it is, it should be a competition based on the category or what type of thing that actually has judging standards. It's like, okay, this competition, we're going to be having a blank whatever contest, and these are the measures that we are judging here today. You get 10 points if you do this, you get 10 points if you do this, and if you lack on these points, then you take it away, and there's a rubric there. But the thing is, I feel that it's a very, very dangerous road to say is like, we're just having a pretty competition, and sorry, the prettiest person's going to win is the problem that I think we're mad about. So I'm speaking for myself there. Yeah, I'm done.
So
I want to point out really quick, it's not a pretty competition, because you're right. It's not about being quote unquote pretty. This is not something that was created with anyone's subjective opinion in mind. What it was created with in mind, and keep in mind that Miss America, MISS, is available to cis women who have never had a biological child or been pregnant. This particular organization, Miss America, was actually intended to create and to uphold the perfect quote unquote example of a model citizen fertile young female. So it is actually, at the end of it, when you get all the way down and distill what is being judged, it is actually a competition on who will someday be the best biological mother. And that is the scariest point of all. Someone who is intelligent, not only intelligent, talented, well-spoken, etc., but also someone who is a biological female who has never been married or had a child before. What do you think that actually leads to? That leads to the new generation of mothers and who they should, quote unquote, look like. That is the most insidious part of all of this.
Oh, so it is like Deb Balls. It is selling mothers off at the spot.
Okay.
Traditional ones, yes.
Let's go to Amanda and Jack, please.
I'm going to pass for the moment.
Okay. Jack, please.
Yeah, and to kind of build on Josie's point a little bit, like the philosophical concept of beauty has been like debated forever. And like that's kind of the thing I take umbrage with, is that like different people have different standards of beauty. Like back in the day, the standard of beauty was that like if you were like a plump landlord in the feudal era, you were hot as fuck. And, you know, the body standards change over time because it's not an objective thing. Like, beauty standards aren't objective and they vary from person to person. And so that is why enforcing them as a cultural concept is very I do not like it. It rubs me the wrong way. We would be in a much better world if you could just be attracted and find beautiful the people you are attracted to and find beautiful, which is not a world we currently live in. People like shamefully like scroll through Pornhub to like find the people that they find beautiful, and I think that that's wrong and it hurts society.
Shame? Oh boy. Let's go to Marcy.
Prime, I feel like I see you shaking your head incredulously and all that. You know, I get it, but I feel like you're really like not engaging with the central disagreement here with what you're saying, which is that you're coming at this from the angle of like, oh well, it's just about like who's the prettiest. You know, it's who's the prettiest, and you can say that's unfair. And I want to focus in on that. I want to focus in on the fact that you kind of said like you could say that's not fair, but you know you can't really write off the fact that like it is in our current society fundamentally unfair. Like specifically to people who are born in different ways who might have different things going on. And like, yeah, no, I don't understand how anyone could watch this, be they a left-winger or a right-winger or a centrist, and think that the take we're making right now is anti-competition. I'm super pro-competition. I'm pro fucking drag competitions where there's a winner and the winner is whose makeup was most on fleek and whose fucking wardrobe was the best. And I'm all for fucking bodybuilding competitions where the swollest lady gets to win a fucking cash prize or whatever. And I'm all for fucking intellectual competitions, and I'm all for mathletes, and I'm all for all of this shit. But as soon as you start making the standard by which you judge a competition like whatever subjective beauty standard the culture has decided upon, because I know like I don't want to, I feel like we get too wrapped up in the definitions of like objective, subjective, whatever. I just want to say there is no such thing as objectivity. I'm taking the full fucking black pill, okay? There is no such thing as objectivity. All the fucking pretty standard is everybody else's fucking subjective standard that has become a collective conscious because of the culture of the country we live in. And it's different depending on culture and like whatever, right? But like it's so fucking toxic and baked into like white supremacy and anti-feminism and all of this shit that to try and divorce it and just say, well, it's just a pretty competition is super, super weird. Like we're talking about how this could go down a slippery slope. I'm saying we're already at the bottom of the slope, okay? We already have shitty, problematic fucking beauty standards enforced on us. And these competitions just make that worse. And especially when it has to do with like fertility and youth or whatever. Because like, I know we like to talk about how like fucking QAnon, like pedophile, whatever. If you want to focus on the real pedophiles, you find fucking child beauty pageant judges, all right? You trace this shit because you keep going younger and younger and more fertile, and now we've got fucking toddlers and tiaras. This whole culture of sexualizing younger and younger women is really gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to respond to all that, oh man. So Marcy.
Well, listen, I had to dab on you just this once because I feel like the last 3 times I've said something to you, you've been like, "Oh yeah."
Marcy, you're the one who said that you wanted to engage with the real world, right? That you didn't want to engage with quote-unquote utopian hypotheticals when we have college for all. But okay, sure. All right. Well, capitalism's a thing in the real world, right? Miss America, which, as John has pointed out, is a scholarship competition, I guess, is not doing so hot. And on the other hand, Miss USA, from what I remember, maybe things have changed, but from what I remember, Miss USA, which got rid of that, right, on Donald Trump's orders, got rid of that whole talent competition and say, no, we're just doing beauty here. That's ascendant.
They were also
right?
the first to include trans girls, USA.
Miss USA. Oh, there you go. But so within the real world, people value.
Wait, is it US that's partially owned by Donald Trump?
Yeah,
It's
that's what I'm saying.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's
it
not
was,
anymore. He
Not
sold his
anymore.
company.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I said.
Okay.
He was the one who got rid of the talent portion. He said, like, why bother? And yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
and he
so
used it to peep on little girls, right?
That was the teen.
Yeah.
That was the Teen USA thing. Yes, that is true. Any case, but capitalism exists in the real world, and the results show, and like which competition is actually advancing, right? So society, and you already understand that society puts a premium on beauty. You can say that this is a very lefty idea that beauty, or that beauty is just completely.
Capitalism is going to exploit all systems for profit.
I agree,
like,
100%.
including the inequalities inherent in beauty standards.
Let me finish my point.
Jack,
Let me finish my point. Then you can hear response to the point.
Are you going to get to it?
I'm trying to, but you keep interrupting me, and then I can't get to it.
I haven't interrupted once. That was Jack.
There we go. All right, great. So, yeah, beauty is a collective decision, right? And if pretty exists, ugly exists. There are those that you can find unattractive, right? You could say that that exists from case by case basis, but the idea that unattractiveness does not exist. This is very extreme lefty idea.
What?
Unattractive.
No.
Unattractiveness.
That's what Josie was saying. Ugly doesn't exist. I wrote it down. That's what you said.
Wait, who's
right?
objectively unattractive?
No,
Yes,
I didn't say
listen,
objective. Did I
ugly-
say that? I didn't say that.
Well,
I said
then, yes,
subjective.
ugly
I
exists.
literally said subjective. You didn't listen to me.
Okay.
Yes,
You didn't listen to
ugly
me.
exists. Ugly exists in the collective consciousness, but my opinion is that the collective consciousness understanding of what ugliness and beauty are is fucking disgusting,
I
Prime.
agree. Okay.
And I feel like
I agree.
wait, but then why did you respond to me saying that by rambling about capitalism?
You
What is
didn't
the,
listen
like,
to my point. You still haven't let me finish
Yeah,
my
I
point, so
did.
you have no idea what my point is. Of course you don't know.
Okay,
That's
what's
why
your
you're so
point? Yeah,
confused. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
finish your point. Capitalism. Yeah.
So I'm saying that within this real world that we actually deal with, right? Since you don't want to deal with hypotheticals, in this real world, since we can't separate these things, and that it is something that is of a premium, and we do have competitions, right? Something like this will exist, right? Beauty pageants will be a thing, right? And that people will want to join into. And what was the other thing? And that's this idea of like, well, it's problematic because some people don't have the thing that's being judged on. That is valued, right? Well, sure, other people don't have other abilities, right? Within other competitions, they would fail. I will never be in the NBA playoffs. It's just not going to happen, right? That's not a thing that I was born. I wasn't born with that skill, and or that talent or anything like that, right? So I won't be there, right? It could be something. I see your comments, Joe. So, yeah, I see your comments. But like I wasn't born with that natural ability, right? I also wasn't born with the face. We had a male beauty competition. I don't think I'd win that either, right? And it sucks, but we have competitions, and people are competition itself excludes people. So if we can accept that we will have competitions, that if that will be a thing, then if we can accept that it will be a thing, then I think beauty pageants. All right, I think I lost my point there.
Wait. Did you finish your point?
Go ahead.
The full point.
Wait. Can I add something to
Prime,
really
don't give
quick?
into the construct.
There is a level here. You may not be in the NBA because the NBA is about how objectively well, and I'm going to use objectively here, you can put balls into a really high hoop. But what we're talking about here is not something where the aim is as objective, unless you take the objective to be Miss America, the most societally attractive fertile cis woman. That's the supposed objective, but the state of objective here is for somebody to be a role model, for somebody to be a good American citizen who does a lot of very nice things for their community. That's what these pageants are supposed to be taking forward. And so rather than the NBA, wherein the goal is stated and is not generally argued about, we're sitting here arguing about not only the fact that beauty pageants exist, but also what their goals are and what constitutes them. And so obviously the goal is not good enough or well established enough in something like a subjective beauty pageant for us to truly get behind it the same way that we can get behind the fact that tall people be in the NBA.
You want to say something, Marcy?
Yeah. I would like to say something. So on your way to becoming a girl boss, I'm afraid you got lost at the fucking gaslight step, all right? Because nowhere in my fucking entire diatribe, and I know, chat, that you're tired of me fucking tangenting and rambling on these panels, all right? But listen, all right? Fucking, I know, I don't remember anywhere in my tangent where I said that we have to, like, fucking look at absurd hypotheticals or whatever. I don't think it's an absurd hypothetical to suggest that we better our society in terms of like bettering fucking people's access to education, bettering through media and education and stuff, like our beauty standards. And I think that once those conditions are met, these things could totally exist in an ethical way, right? But because that's not the case right now, I feel like you're not understanding what my argument is, right? I'm not arguing to like ban beauty pageants forever. No more beauty, no more standard of beauty. And I'm not arguing there's no standard of beauty that exists, right? I'm arguing that the current one is bad, the current system is bad, and until the system is better, this tradition will not be able to be done in an ethical way. Like, it's still gonna happen, sure. We can sit here all night and be like, well, it's still gonna happen. And like, yeah, whatever, I can see that. It's still gonna happen. Doesn't mean it's good.
Marcy,
I agree.
I think that I think pageants are more gatekeep than gaslight, in my opinion.
Pageants are the gatekeep, Prime is the gaslight, and I'm the fucking girl boss, all right? We're having fun here.
I agree that the pageants are toxic. I agree that judging people on that standard is problematic and can cause a lot of damage. So hopefully
You even self-deprecated yourself by it. Just to let you know,
Yeah.
you even said
I agree.
about yourself
Yeah.
that you don't feel like you meet that objective standard. Well, I disagree, Prime. I think if you found 5 people who thought that you were objectively beautiful, you would win that pageant. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about.
Yeah.
The thing is, as well, it's not like beauty standards are made by majority opinion. Beauty standards aren't democratically created. They're created by people in power, and that's why historically beauty standards have been white male standards of what women should look like. And there's I can't even remember who said it, but there's a really famous quote about like plastic surgery, which is like talking about how women are already beautiful, but they're not necessarily what men deem to be what a woman should look like. So these constant, like, makeup and hair and lip filler is all to create an image of what men believe women should look like, not what women should look like and do look like naturally.
Agreed. Yeah. All right. So we'll just leave it there. But thank you for engaging with that. Appreciate it.
Amanda had.
Oh, sorry. Did you? I thought you were. Didn't want to say something.
You know, I just want to say I overheard someone wasn't paying quite attention saying that they're not trying to get rid of beauty standards. Well, I'm totally for getting rid of all beauty standards. So just wanted to put that out there.
Oh no, I said I'm not trying to get. I said I'm not trying to get rid of the concept of beauty. I think that like having any one standard of beauty applied to like all people in a culture is pretty fucking cringe. So yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay. Okay, just making sure.
All right. So let's move on to the next topic.
Imagine if everyone had my type. Like if everybody just liked like curly-haired like Mediterranean women. That'd be cool.
The Marcy beauty standard.
That's true.
Josie Bay.
Just assume I'm the beauty standard, and
Also, you know what? I was tweeting.
and either they get it or they don't. And if they don't, I'm just like, that's too bad for you.
Okay. Topic
I'm
2.
Supermodel.
Topic 2. When sex is discussed in political spaces, it's mostly in the context of consent and assault. What is really discussed is sex in terms of enjoyment. In the West, sex and sexuality through an explicitly female lens is still relatively new. So, do you think feminism, with its focus on equality between the sexes, made sex better? Or, considering how sex is treated in the media, has the movement only changed the conversation around the subject without advancing the act itself? And I want to thank our good friend Joe for helping me come up with this topic. Very much appreciated. So, Joe, if you could start us off on this.
Yeah, okay. I love this topic personally. So I think that socially we're very focused on the idea of purely when it comes to women and sex, or basically anyone who's not a man and sex, is this idea of non-violation. And that is the basis and the only language and the only frame with which we have to talk about sex generally. So it's all about consent, and then consent is framed into this weird thing where it's like consent is sexy. Consent is the only language we have to talk about the experience. Very little is based around respect, reciprocity, autonomy. Very little is based on actual pleasure, actually connecting with your partner. We don't have the language to talk about this, and often when it comes to the fact that we have so much sexual violence in our society, when we talk about sex in a public sphere, we talk about sexual trauma, we talk about sexual danger, we talk about staying safe. So the language that we have is very much based on how to not get harmed. Basically, there's no talk about actual pleasure. And furthermore, we have a series where laws then try to institute what kind of sex we are allowed to have. So we see more and more consent laws change the way that sex is defined, so that there's a differentiation between sex and sex that involves choking, or sex with a condom and sex without a condom. And laws throughout the world change to sort of ingrain what should be viewed as good and normal sex, what safe sex is viewed as good sex, which really marginalizes kink and BDSM communities and anyone who has different kinds of sexual practices. I mean, for me, what I find really interesting is the report levels of university students and the kind of sex that they're having. There's a big discrepancy across genders as to who is actually having good experiences. And of course, this is a place where we are all learning. A lot of people have their first sexual encounters in their university years. But if we are learning, how come at the end of this sort of period of evolution, sexual evolution, most men experiencing orgasms in a sexual encounter and very few women are? What are we actually learning? How as a society should we talk about sex? What language do we need? For a society that is obsessed with sex, we love sex, but we don't love talking about it in an actual meaningful way. It's not just about like talking about like your experiences, like what language do we need to incorporate and create to be able to say like, there's actually sex in between like a mind-blowing transcendental experience and sexual assault, and how do we talk about that space in between? What do you think needs to be talked about?
Thank you. Let's go to Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I think that well, I agree with some of what Joe said, not 100% of it. I think that consent is necessary, especially when you're talking about like BDSM communities and kink communities and stuff like that. Like consent is the first step for any of those experiences to be good. And so I think that's why the focus on consent is so important. And I think that largely when we're talking about this issue, yeah, feminism has made sex better. It's way better having sex with somebody who's like, "Hey, do you actually want to have sex?" Who respects your autonomy, who like actually gives a shit about you. Yeah, that's way better sex than somebody who's like willing to not even ask. Like doesn't even want to ask, doesn't even really care. So yeah, my position is that while it hasn't been the panacea that like fixes all sex, 10 out of 10 orgasms, but I think it is the first step that is necessary for like positive sexual experiences. And so to that end, I think that we need to have those conversations and talk about consent in order to actually unlock even deeper levels of connection between human beings.
Prime, can I just clarify something really quickly? Because I really don't want to come across as trying to abolish consent, because consent is obviously extremely important. Consent is the legal basis for which we have to understand what is sexual assault, right? But I object to things like consent is sexy. Consent is necessary, not sexy. Consent is fundamental. You should not be engaging in sex with someone without their consent. I don't need it to be sexy. I don't need it to be anything other than what it is, which is permission to touch someone without violating them. And so what I'm saying is beyond consent, We need
Gotcha.
language on top of consent, because for so many people, it's like, do you consent? Enthusiastically, yeah. And then that's like the end of the conversation.
Gotcha.
I was waiting for you to say that consent is not sexy. I was waiting for you to. It was going to come out. I was waiting for it. All right, let's go to Amanda.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of background on where Jo is coming from because I tuned into her stream, I think it was last night, about this topic. So if I lose anyone, I'm sorry, but there's a little bit of background here. And kind of to bring back, with impact, over intent matters, and especially in the criminal justice system. But when it comes to consent and assault, saying I didn't mean to assault someone is never really addressed. And so I learned from Jo the other night. So I want to give her back the mic and then respond because she can explain a little bit better what I am talking about here in regards to men's intent and then perceiving their sexual partner's experience in regards to their facial expression. But then I want to expand on, I just can't explain it as well as she does.
Yeah,
so I'd like her to do that.
So it's super quick. All it is that consent is negotiated, not given. So in a sexual encounter, there might be activities that you consent to, and then throughout you might stop giving consent to particular activity, and then you may go back to consenting. So beyond getting verbal consent, you actually need to be in touch with your partner and respecting them and checking in that they're okay. And that involves things like respect and reciprocity, not just the exchange of verbal consent, because a lot of people who sexually assaulted people didn't do it because they meant to. They simply did it because they weren't engaged with their partner. They weren't checking in that their sexual partner was enjoying the experience. They were focused on their own experience.
Yeah, and so then back to the having more words and things like that, especially in legalese and whatnot. We don't have like negligent rape or negligent assault and things like that, when I do believe that does happen. I mean, when both parties are inebriated or one gets caught up in a moment. And I'm not excusing sexual assault or rape in any way. I just want to clarify that. But I am saying that there is negligence involved in some of this, and it's not always the intent.
Marcy?
So I guess I don't know where, like, how to fix it and whatnot, but yes.
Marcy?
What's up? Is it still opening statements on this topic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think you can't. I'm gonna keep this brief for a reason I'll probably get into later. But I think you can't divorce the concept of like the political conversation around sex from how much people enjoy sex. I very much doubt that a lot of women enjoyed sex prior to the advent of feminism. I know that's speculative, but when you don't have concepts like consent, when you don't have concepts like maybe sexual expressions beyond like heterosexual, heterosexual is the wrong word. I'm gonna do better about that, all right? Fucking, if you have like fucking penis in vagina sex and that's it, right? It's a lot harder to enjoy sex. The reason I feel like I should probably keep this brief is because I actually do not fuck because I don't enjoy penetrative sex. I just don't like penis in vagina. Whether it's that I'm not comfortable in my own body or whether it's that I just have IBS and I don't want my butthole all stuffed up. Whatever it may be in this conversation, I just don't enjoy it. I'm more about the alternative sexual expression stuff. So I think that kind of thing being brought into the more mainstream conversations and being like brought into this kind of limelight of like, oh, well, you can have like penis in vagina sex, but you can also do like all this stuff and that's also sex. And if you want to get intimate with your partner, there's a whole lot of shit you could do regardless of the gender or sex or anything of that partner. So yeah, it's hard for me to imagine a world where the enjoyment of sex worldwide hasn't gone up since feminism came to be.
All right. Well, to my audience, I wish you all an empty butthole. All right, Red Charlotte.
An
please.
empty butthole. Hell yeah. Empty
Empty
butthole. No,
butthole.
I'm kidding. No, don't actually. If you like anal, go for it. I'm not. I don't mean to. No, I don't. I just. I don't. wanna
Marcy
come off as
coming on
agreeing
here
with
and
that. It's just a
shaming
personal-
anal sex.
Listen, I would never shame anal sex, but I have IBS, so it would not go well for me. Okay, oi, it would be very messy.
We're not shaming anal sex. We're just saying we wish you a happy empty butthole.
Yeah.
It's not
Like
that I wish
devoid
you.
of
It's not
anything
that I,
other
no,
than
it's-
what you want in it.
Yeah.
It's not that I wish you an empty butthole. It's that I wish you a poopless and clean pee-pee. All right.
Okay. Oh boy.
A very fresh and fulfilling butthole.
A fresh and fulfilling.
Red Charlotte, do you have any more comments about buttholes, or are you going to talk about something else?
Not about buttholes, no. But I was, if you guys want to know about how feminism affects sex, right? Just look at the difference in sexual gratification for women between East and West Germany. All right, that's all I'm gonna say. Socialism makes sex better, all right?
Right on.
I'm a little skeptical about that. I gotta say,
I'm trying to
get.
get railed in the gulag.
Oh boy.
What?
I need context.
Oh,
I
boy.
need more of that from that.
Yeah.
It's basically like people on East Germany West Germany. No, East. I'm getting like my left and rights get all mixed up. People in East Germany basically had more free time, which means they had more ability to have sex more often, which means they had orgasms more often, which means they were sexually satisfied more than people in West Germany.
I mean, that's why people, when they're like, "Oh yeah, I've never had an orgasm," I'm like, "Well, yeah, who has the time?" Truly.
Oh, boy.
There is
Sorry, hold on,
also a book.
We got to move forward. We got to get to it. So, Marcy,
Socialism makes your pussy pop. That's
There you
it.
go.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Yes.
Pussy Poppin'
Socialism
Marx.
give you that
That's
wop.
what he was known as, really. That's his nickname. All right, let's go. Maddie.
Yeah, I mean, I love this topic. First of all, like when I saw it, and I was like, of course, Joe gave us like a really meaty topic to get into, because this is a fascinating question, because it's true, especially from like the female, like feminine standpoint. We don't talk about sexual pleasure at all. It's all about, yeah, like protecting yourself and consent and all that, but then you kind of leave it. Even representations of female like sexual pleasure in the media are treated differently than male pleasure. Like I remember there was a documentary that was done, I believe it was by the guys who like made South Park, and they talked about the process for having their movie rated. And then they, as part of that, interviewed a bunch of other filmmakers who had gone through that same process, and how when a man like is ejaculating in a movie, like that's seen as acceptable. But like for a long time, the concept of any women like experiencing any sort of like sexual pleasure, they were so limited in what they could do without it immediately getting like an R or NC-17 rating, because like that was what was deemed unacceptable and lewd, right? And so it's tough, because I want to be able to openly discuss these things, but I think I still suffer, like me personally, from a lot of like internalized misogyny, where you don't want to be like seen as a slut, a harlot, or like, how dare you talk about this? So I'm really excited for this conversation. And Joe, to pick your brain about this, because I know that this is something that you have done streams about and talked about. So I'm really excited.
All that stuff about the movies makes sense. Ladies, nipples are dangerous. Twitch says so. So
No, I mean,
Honestly,
I know
the
exactly
amount
what.
of power they assume my nipples have so much power, and I'm like, if only, girl.
Blue
Hey,
Valentine,
mind
the
you, I've had
Ryan,
2 babies for years. Come on.
That's
Blue
right, Amanda.
Valentine, the movie with Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams, Blue Valentine, there is a scene where he goes down on her, and they were told that if they wanted a lower rating, they had to cut that scene. But you see men getting blowjobs in movies all the time.
Constantly.
Okay,
Well, you
so
know what they say. It's good for the goose. It's good for the gosling.
let's
I'm
go
sorry, I haven't been
for
paying attention.
Josie. Josie's next, please.
Okay. So I look at the question again and I see like political discourse. Yeah, a lot of times when it's brought in political discourse, it's probably because of lack of consent or assaults, because you're talking about accountability measures and things like that. But when we look at media and things like that, I do believe that feminism is a good thing. But I'm going to take it into the route as one of the trans women here about the idea of like sex is experienced still through a very cis hetero lens as well as just a cis lens in general. The fact of the matter is like nobody's ever talking about the quality of a girl pee, okay? Like a girl pee is awesome and there's a lot of benefits that come with that. I mean, listen, Natalie Wood, it's a great mouth feel to it, right? Like it's good, it's fine. But but but
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, what did you say? Because
I
I
thought, I
heard,
thought you said girl pee.
yeah, I
Like just
heard
girl
girl
pee.
pee.
Penis.
That's what I call her.
Yeah.
I call it my girl penis.
Yeah.
It's a girl
Okay,
pee. That's my
okay.
girl
I,
pee.
I thought you said like girl pee, like it feels good to pee when you're a
urine.
girl,
Like
and I was like, yeah, it does feel
No.
good to pee when I'm a girl. You're right.
Yeah, it does. It does. I can
It feels
attest to that.
wonderful. Yeah.
But no, I'm just saying
Send
I
shivers
call
down my spine. Body safety.
my pee I call her my
Yeah.
girl pee. That's what I call her. So that's that's how it works. So maybe that's TMI for everybody, but fine. Um so I really want to talk about the fact that that does have an effect in the language, especially when it comes to like how we're so sexualized in culture, and how Maddie talked before about like the internalized misogyny and like the shame we're supposed to feel of female bodies. But not only as a trans woman, at least this is, I'm speaking for myself here, but things that I've experienced is not only are trans women supposed to feel the same way cis women feel about the shame of trying to be hypersexualized and things like that, their organs are seen as gross and disgusting. So we feel even more shame around the act of having sex. So when a trans woman talks about pleasure in bed, it is super taboo. Nobody's talking about that, right? And if they are, they're probably talking about post op sexual pleasure factories. Like can you still have pleasure after post operations? Nobody's talking about like the amount of intimacy that is around the idea of like all feminine bodies and all bodies. So it's like, so like if you think that feminism has made sex better, there's still a long way to go before we make sex better, right? Because right now, like Pornhub just barely changed the categories for transgender. They just recently changed the category to transgender instead of like shemale and things like that, right? And like chicks with dicks. Like those, that's how it was seen on porn. Like
It
it
was
just
literally like a
happened.
year ago. Like
Yeah, it was
or like
literally
a
a year
couple months.
ago.
Yeah, it
A
wasn't
couple months. It was very
yeah,
recent.
very recent.
Very recent. So we still have a very long way to go. And when it comes to like enthusiastic consent, like yes, yes, and yes. I agree that the negotiation is true as well. Like Joe said, like is there have been times when I'm in the middle of the act and maybe it's a little the girl boss thing happened with me, but I'm just like, you know what, I'm not into this anymore. It's now uncomfortable. Like let's do something different. Like I've been in those situations as well. So I believe it's very, very important for that negotiation process to exist. And there's a lot of fear wrapped up, and I'm going to talk about like trans issues on this topic, but it's true. Is like if I'm at a bar and I'm interested in somebody, before I am like say, hey, let's go do something, because I am polyamorous even though I have a partner, but like let's go do something. It's like, hey, before we do anything, I'm a trans woman, right? And they're like, oh yeah, right. Like it's a survival thing. So you even have to have consent to be able to like continue the conversation with people in some cases. It's like, so I know I kind of took it into a transy place, but that's kind of the realm that I operate in. But yeah, when I think of like feminism and sex and pleasure, I do naturally think of it differently. And I know other women in here think
So
of it that
yeah.
way.
Yeah,
So
Josie.
hold on. We can do but Johnny Scarlett.
Hey, okay, so my opening statement on this, I want to bring it back to this idea that we're not necessarily talking about, like Joe said, we're not talking about a violation of consent here with this particular topic. We're talking about not only consent, but what comes after, the supposed either enjoyment or at the very least what we can more generally call satisfaction. Because let's put it right here, BDSM is a thing. Not everybody wants explicit enjoyment in their sex. That is also a thing. Sexual standards for what we should expect in a healthy relationship and in a healthy environment. That today is mutual satisfaction. And that can mean whatever these people think it should mean. It can mean feeling good for both parties. It can mean one party feels really good and the other gets to watch. It's all sorts of things. But that is the goal today, post feminism and post what feminism has turned into, because we have to remember that feminism has gone in waves and not every wave has been as egalitarian as we would like it to be. In my observation, this goal and standard for what sex should be and what it can be has ebbed and flowed throughout time and with each generational foundation. And when we lose generational foundations, such as the dip into the dark ages, things like gender equality can go away and they can be changed. So as we have seen throughout history, this goal can change, but nevertheless, the foundations of sex and the fact that anyone can experience sexual satisfaction, if not a full orgasm, is the prevailing factor. Now, I would say what the new prevailing factor is betterment. Betterment is the new concept here. And so education toward that benefit, speaking about pleasure, speaking about sexual satisfaction, those are the new concepts here that feminism and its ilk have brought about. So I do want to mention also, this was not part of my initial notes, but someone mentioned when we talk about it, I think it was Maddie, talked about when we do get to talk about pleasure and if we don't talk about pleasure. And I would say that I do see plenty of people, let's make this into a stereotype here. Women in the South are much more open about not being satisfied with things than a lot of other people in America. And so I do see people, at least on the internet, talk about their sexual satisfaction from a feminine standpoint, but I mostly see it in the form of memes. And this is a further obscure obfuscation, I believe is the word. This is a further obfuscation of how open we're allowed to be about it. We're open to talking about, how we weren't satisfied or were satisfied by head or by penetration or whatever. But mostly when it comes to memes and when it comes to some form of humor. So that is another level that I think we need to get past. But yes, feminism, as it has evolved, has become a flow for betterment of mutual satisfaction. Whether that will continue is based on generational foundations and not necessarily feminism itself.
Let's go to Joe and then Marcy. I think she had her hand up.
Yeah, so there are a few things I want to touch on. I think something really important that Maddie and Johnny just brought up is this idea of sexual expression versus sexual desire. So for women, sexual expression has very much been liberated. We're allowed to be sexy. Same for trans women. You're allowed to be sexualized, right? You're allowed to present as sexual, but it's still very taboo to express sexual desire and talk about what you want. And a lot of that is internalized. That includes saying, I don't want sex, I don't want this. I don't want this. And it's really interesting. This is actually something that is often misused is like women and rape fantasies. And actually a core part of the root of women and the high level of fantasies about not giving consent is the fact that women don't feel that they have a right to sexual desire. But they do. Women are taught to be desired. So it's easy to imagine and have a fantasy where someone wants you so bad that they just take you. It's very difficult for a woman to have a fantasy based on her own sexual desire because that hasn't been liberated at all. And I think, Johnny, something really interesting you brought up is the difference in where we can talk about it as well, right? Talk about it in an infantilized, joking way with each other. Can women express what they desire in the bedroom with whomever they are having sex with? That's something different. And then to what extent is women or trans women's desire naturalized in a public environment? I think it was really interesting to talk about I definitely think this issue is a trans issue as much as it is anything. On my stream yesterday, I was talking about consent laws and how they sort of foundationalize and cement normative ideas about sex. So what we were listening to was Canadian consent laws, and there was rulings on what if you didn't disclose information before sex, was that considered rape? And so in Canada, there is a law that technically says that if you don't disclose that you're a trans person before entering a sexual engagement with someone, that's a sexual assault. That's shocking. And it is looking to ingrain normative ideas about what sex should be, not what sex is, right? So that's the issue with legalizing. I do want to say that, like, I think obviously since women have rights, women have better sex, right? That wasn't so much what I was aiming at. What I was aiming at is, like, and Johnny touched on this, there have been different waves, right? Like, for instance, second wave feminism had some very strong things to say about sex, right? This is, we saw this break between the sex negative and the sex positive movement. Where sex positivity was about expanding out into the BDSM community, the kink community, giving women this freedom of sexual expression. Sex negative women said, we can't even get through a day without being raped. How about we focus on that first and get those rights cemented before we start saying it's okay for people to whip us and spank us and all of this is fine and you can't criticize it, right? So in some ways, there are a lot of feminists who would push against BDSM communities because they think that they naturalize this idea of violence against women and rough sex and the violation of women. And it's interesting because I think those communities actually have a much stronger and more rigorous idea of consent and pleasurable experience beyond what can be and should be instituted legally. And then finally, something good from the second wave, which is super interesting that you brought up, Marcy, is that Andrea Dworkin, who's a second wave feminist, not so great with sex workers because of her own personal trauma, but was trans friendly. She spoke about how patriarchy means that we view penetrative sex as sex. That is the standard default idea of what sex is, which is interesting because men are more likely to get pleasure out of that. People who are doing the penetrating are the most likely to receive pleasure out of that. So it's a heteronormative patriarchal understanding of sex, when actually, if we were focused on what is the most pleasurable overall, that may not be the activity that we default to as sex. It wouldn't be the sex default.
Mm. A quick question, Joe, when you're talking about women not being able to express sexuality, something I think we talked about before, but just like, or desire in which way, like women not feeling comfortable even to come up and tell someone that they like them. It's like, would you include that as in part of that, or do you think that's something separate?
Okay, so I think that's really interesting because I've heard these takes before from a big streamer on this platform, this idea that women should pull their weight and they should do more hitting on men, right? It does tie in because the backlash for, and this is so, I'm sorry, it's so cis, but like the backlash for a woman hitting on a dude and getting rejected is different to the backlash for a man hitting on someone and getting rejected. Because like standard, of course, it's humiliating no matter what, right? But it's like if a woman does it, she's a slut. Like if a woman's out there hitting on people and constantly getting rejected, she's a slut because she's like out there looking for it. She wants it. She wants it so fucking bad and she doesn't even get it because she's like undesirable. So it's like a double whammy. Whereas like if a dude gets rejected, like it's humiliating and it's shit, but like that the social value isn't damaged in the same way because there isn't this expectation of purity above all. As like you have to remember, like, and I've spoken to you about this on stream before, women's honor, their credibility is traditionally legally codified as relating to their chastity. So we have a legal history of a woman's word and the way that we trust it being based on whether or not she has slept with men. So whether or not that is still the case, the echo of that, the remnants of that, the shadow of that still looms over our social reality, which says that if women are out there hitting on people and getting rejected, then she's loose, she's a slut, she can't be trusted. Any trouble she gets into, well, she brought it on herself.
Or slut shaming in court cases, yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. Marcy?
Unmuted myself before speaking. Hell yeah.
Such progress. So brave.
I know. I'm making so much progress. I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm taking accountability for my past actions. So specifically that law in Canada, I think it was, about how like not disclosing your genitals before sex is rape. I think they called that Destiny's Law. when they've signed that into order. I think it was called Destiny's Law. Yeah, pretty cringe law. Not a law I agree with. If anyone
Yeah.
thought that was valid, I'd probably call them a dumb fuck.
Co-sponsored by Stephen Bonnell, yeah.
Yeah, co-sponsored by Senator Stephen Vanilla. I don't know. Does Canada have senators? I don't know.
Mouthy
Any Canucks
infidel.
in my
Yeah.
Okay,
That
so
was-
I'm glad. I had to get that little sting in. I'm sorry. I know he's not here, but the specter hangs over me like a ghost. Okay, fucking Joe. I really appreciate what you said just now about how like fucking we think of penetrative sex as sex, right? Because that's like what's most likely to give like cis straight white men pleasure. And I think that actually like that concept applies. And I mentioned this to Prime earlier, and you kind of wrote it off, buddy. I think this concept applies to the talk of beauty standards too. I think that a lot of our society seems conveniently designed to benefit cis white wealthy men and what they think is good and what they think is pleasurable. And
If
I
only
think
there
that
was
we
a
should...
term for this, right?
Yeah. If only there was a term for this. If only there was a theory, for instance. But no, so like to answer the prompt though, like the original prompt, I just thought of another thing. The whole concept of sex as like a sin that is only good for procreation and that you keep in the bedroom, right, is something that feminism has like had issue with from day one. So I think that honestly, just on that issue, we can say that feminism has been objectively a success for like the pleasurability of sex. I think like the fact that people now have sex just for pleasure, like based bonobos instead of solely for procreation, like cringe human cucks, is fucking awesome. And I think that has really contributed a lot to like people's enjoyment of sex, just in general.
Jack, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah. To back up Red Charlotte's point earlier about how socialists have better sex, I encourage you all to check out a book by an ethnographer named Kristen Godsey called Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence. Came out a couple years ago. So check that out. Also, yes, be more like the based bonobo.
And the
Bonobos are fucking dope. Every bonobo has a 9-inch cock that they carry around with them outstretched at all times, and they all just be
Every single
fucking
one.
all the time.
You know
They
a
all
lot
just
about
be-
bonobo dicks, but I
They're-
love
I
it.
do.
I mean,
They're
listen,
agender.
they
I'm pretty sure it's not true.
Well, no, that's because when I
They're-
was 13, I was like, hey, did you know that bonobos are the only other animal that have sex for pleasure? Isn't that fucking funny?
What? I thought
And so, like,
dolphins
I-
did too.
Yeah, dolphins do too.
Dolphins are criminals and dolphins are rapists, all right?
Yeah,
I think
dolphins are
very
literally-
This is
was like-
dolphin slander,
It was
and
like
I want
shark-
to for it.
The meme is like sharks are like just like really dumb and will only attack you if they're really hungry and sad. But like dolphins have like the capacity for evil, right?
I
Like
know.
sharks are just like
Yes.
do it on accident,
Fuck
but like
dolphins.
they're
Well,
malicious, right?
like, we
They'll
have
like
this
bully
idea-
sharks and they'll ram sharks with their noses for fun.
Good.
They won't eat them.
Good.
They'll just murder them and then leave.
Do
They'll
you-
just jump
We
them.
have this idea in our society of like the criminal psychopath, of like the person who feels no emotions, just has a raw desire for evil and destruction and the intelligence of a
dolphin.
god. And that's just a dolphin. That's just what they are. They
I
just
am going to
fucking-
defend the
Yeah.
dolphins here because
No.
we're taking their food
Yeah.
supply. Humans are taking their food supply, so you know what? They can be as evil as they want because
Look,
humans are murdering them
If
at a
I looked
ridiculous
that
rate.
Look, if we're gonna
Yes, I
ally
think
with
so.
anything in the
too,
ocean, we're
okay?
gonna ally with anything in the ocean. It has to be the octopus. It's completely alien from us,
Yeah.
Yes.
way smarter,
Yeah,
and
Yes.
yeah, that's what I'm
also
talking about. Get
where
some
we just
fucking
have different
pussy up in here.
priorities.
Get some
Different
octopus
priorities.
Also,
pussy.
dolphins. Can I nerd out for a second? Dolphins have very similar qualities to humans because they're mammals, but because octopi have the ability to not only perceive but also to emanate wavelengths of light that we're not familiar with on a regular human scale of like red, blue, green, they would be the most optimal animal for us to learn how to effectively communicate with.
Let's do
Sorry.
it.
Okay.
Let's make an alliance. They can have the sea. We have the land.
Okay.
Dude, wait till you find out that dolphins set up a forced labor system from the octopi.
no.
Wait
Oh,
till you
no.
find that out.
Oh boy.
They're-
And we
Oh
can
no.
maybe get back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, I don't
but
think that you're gonna find a lot of like a lot of us fighting about this though, Prime, because this is like, I mean, the as Joe introduced this, it's really a matter of like, is feminism historically good, or things like, is it historically good for the betterment of mutual satisfaction in sex? And I think the answer is just yes. I don't know that we really have.
So it's
any...
not about a
Yeah.
fight. I mean, we usually don't fight on this thing. Yeah, last topic was unusual because I had a different opinion from the rest of you.
Well, I
and
mean,
mixed it up.
like,
but,
I mean, I can push back on Johnny on that.
Yeah.
I can push back on Johnny on that easy because this is you raised a point actually, right? Even look at when we see women attack. Sorry, my dog has literally climbed onto my desk. Look at the way, like, when a woman is attacked on the street, suddenly once again we reinforce this idea that women are perpetually in sexual danger, and women and sometimes when we do these things we accidentally reify. So sorry.
Oh my god.
Come back to me. Come back to me.
Okay. But the UK, but talking about that, right? So working on Joe's point, right? That's what that incident in the UK was about. So a woman was attacked, and I think by like a security guard or something was found out. But like the response from
An
the
off-duty
police,
police officer, Metro Police.
Metro Police, okay, sure. Well, the response from the police was going around the neighborhood saying, "Well, women, you need to stay inside," right? Like this one person gets attacked, and it's like, "Well, you're all in perpetual danger," rather than some other solution. And there are many others. You could say, like, when houses are broken in, right, and, or a murder happens, is doesn't say let's lock down the entire neighborhood, but it's like we got to protect, I guess, chastity or something. But yeah,
that's the thing, right? It's like even the fact that like the worst, okay, look at someone like Brett Kavanaugh or look at Bill Clinton. The worst thing you can be in our society is a sex pest. All of your other transgressions will disappear in the background of sexually assaulting a woman, right? Or harassing a woman. The worst thing that can happen to you is not that you get murdered or assaulted, it's that you get raped or sexually assaulted. And I agree. And like, we don't need to, like, I don't need to hear people's stories, etc. Like that's not what I'm trying to pull up, right? That sexual assault has a unique component that is different to anything else, right? But the way that we elevate this kind of attack above all other things suggests that there's something uniquely, and I don't mean individually, I mean as a society, suggests that there's something uniquely valuable and important about a woman's sexuality that we need to protect. And I think that even, Kate Mann, who is an analytic feminist, she's in my school, she just did this conceptual analysis of patriarchy, or misogyny, sorry. And in it, she went on this big rampage about choking, right? And a lot of people demonized choking as like something that is inherently violent or has no place in a sexual experience. There are a lot of people where that is their thing. They love getting choked. And so what I'm saying is that like feminism, in the attempt to protect women, can sometimes reify this idea that a woman's sexual value is the most important component of her, that women are perpetually in danger, and that things outside of normative standard vanilla sex are inherently misogynistic and dangerous to women.
And Jack.
Well, yeah, and I like that is like part of how the manifestation of the patriarchy, right? Like it is the fact that, well, men just can't control their desires, okay? That's why you have to curtail your own bodies. You have to curtail you have to be worried at all times. You have to be protected at all times. You must stay indoors because you are at such threat. And it is in effect a kind of smokescreen on society that prevents us from actually dealing with the underlying issue of those systems that reinforce, even in the attempt to like undo its own evil, it just reinforces the same point, the same underlying ideas.
Yeah. Anyone else on this one? Because I think it's just so much more to be said here. Talking about, so I think the conversation split a bit, right? So talking about like how we deal with assault, but then But then again, maybe it's not because of how we look at pleasure as well, right? I guess maybe you would say those things are tied, and that again that women's sexuality and its violation, right, is something that is a a step above other violations, and there are a great many violations a human can experience, but it's a step above all of that, and that's because it's outside the control of its designated as a designated person who gets to enjoy her sexuality, right? Does that make sense? I hope that made sense at all. John?
Yeah. I think that individualism, just to go off you, Prime, and to sort of go back to my initial statement about this, that individualism as to what is pleasurable and what is satisfactory to the individual person, not just the woman involved, not just the man involved, and not groups of them together, certainly, that has evolved throughout feminism. Because at one point, feminism was second wave. Feminism was only cis females. Feminism was protecting, and these are all sort of different points, but at one point, feminism was protecting the cis, heteronormative, general consensus of what quote unquote sex is, and that involved penetration, that involved procreation. And then it sort of moved into a new offshoot wherein only lesbian sex was okay and pleasurable because it was the only sex that didn't penetrate, and it was the only sex that didn't inherently have patriarchy as a center. And these are all ideas that we've sort of grown past as egalitarians, as who may call feminists, because individualism has come into play in sex. And so, as I stated, I very carefully chose the words mutual satisfaction for what we now see as a healthy sexual outcome, because it is not just about pleasure. It is not just about procreating or not procreating. It is not just about whatever the sexual act may be, whether it's penetrative or not. It is about what is mutually agreed upon and negotiated, to pull from Joe, during the overall act of having a sexual experience. And this is sort of where I get into like the total non-objectivity of what a sexual experience even is. Okay, and I won't say any more about that. What's up, Joe?
I just wanted to say, because exactly, it's really interesting, right, that you say that like the aim is like mutual satisfaction, right, which I totally agree with. But then I keep coming back to Maddie's point, which I totally agree with as well, which is like sometimes in a sexual situation, you don't feel comfortable because of internalized things expressing what will get you to that place of satisfaction. So it's great that that's the aim, but even the fact that like it sort of feels like at times in this we're like, okay, well, we've said everything we have to say. We don't have the language or the conceptual frames to talk about sex in a meaningful way outside of like, is someone being violated, or like, we don't have that language or that comfortability to know, like, how do we move something from this idea that like penetration is the number one standard of sex? How do we change the culture so that women can express their desires without it being either turned into a joke or being like I mean, I did a video on bimbos. A huge thing about bimbos is the idea that they're overtly sexual, but they're instantly turned into a joke as well, right? So like whenever women are explicitly sexual, they're devalued and they're turned into a joke. So of course these internalized things continue, because not only are they devalued and turned into a joke, but then if the sexual trauma that we're taught we should expect our entire life does occur, and we have been explicit about our sexual desires, that will be used to present us as sexual people who are asking for it anyway.
Yeah. That's why I don't really talk about like sexual stuff on stream unless in a context of like one of these streams, like some explicit educational context. It's not just because I'm kind of a prude, although I kind of am, that's just a personal thing with me, but it's also to protect myself. Because if I was to have someone get mad at me and try to like perform one of these cancellation campaigns on me throughout the internet, which we should all think about throughout our careers as streamers, Even if that was to happen, I don't want anyone to be able to bring in a sexual component with me because it makes me so uncomfortable as kind of a prudish person. I protect myself with that. And that's an individual decision.
So,
It's not
Well, I mean-
something that needs to be
sorry, Joe, please.
Just something interesting to that is that, like, the amount of times, and I've said this a lot, but like the amount of times on this platform that I get painted as sex positive because I talk about sex when actually I'm sex negative, I think is something that should be highly critiqued and our desires should be analyzed. But the fact that if you talk about sex at all, right, instantly it's assumed that you're like just a very sexual person, and people feel comfortable talking to you as a sexual object rather than understanding that you can talk about it as a concept separated. Like for me, sex is at the basis of feminism because interaction between genders is often sexual. So, and that's all genders. So it has to be discussed. But if we can't discuss it and divorce it from our individual experiences,
yeah, then
it becomes really difficult.
It's all about what you've done in the bedroom. Like that's eventually it all spirals down to that. Let's go, Marcy.
Can she define sex negative?
That's literally what I was about to ask. I was going to ask, what is your definition of like sex positive, sex negative?
Yeah, so I know there's the sex negative in psychology, which is about like viewing sex as like a disgusting and dirty thing that should, very religious behind closed doors view of sex. For me, sex negativity is not about hating sex at all. I'm very much into like exploring ideas that are pushed out in BDSM and kink communities, but it's about questioning the sexual practices and desires that are prevalent in today's society, and questioning where they come from and acknowledging that the basic fact that patriarchy doesn't somehow stop at the bedroom door. So like I take issue with like certain practices that are viewed as just good on their face and not open to critique because they relate to sex. So it's basically a desire to highly critique sex and the influences that may shape our view of it.
Josie?
It's valid, but I don't necessarily know if that makes you... I don't know. Maybe if that's just your definition of the word. But when you say sex negative, I think of like someone on the swerfy spectrum. Somebody.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe like, yeah. So
What's really ironic too about that is that most people who are sex negative, the way you're describing it, Marcy, call themselves sex critical, and I would reverse that. I
was just about to say that.
And Joe is sex critical.
That's what I'm saying. I fundamentally agree with everything that you're saying right now, Joe. I just I think that like wanting to be critical of certain problematic aspects of sex that don't, like, you're right, like they the social standards don't disappear as soon as sex is involved. Like it's not like sex is immune to criticism. I think that's a different position than being like sex negative.
Maybe sex neutral. I don't know. Yeah, sex neutral. Maybe something. Maybe sex neutral might be a better term. Or something.
Sex neutral seems like
I mean, it's always that thing as well of like location. Obviously, in America, terms have different like understandings. Within academia, terms have different understandings as well. So like I do always try and whenever I start a topic, because I use terms that I also use language that often that can sound very second wave. So if someone was listening for like a dog whistle or a warning red flag, then I always try and like start a conversation by saying, first of all, like I'm not a swerf, I'm not a TERF at all. Like this is not part of my ideology. So if you hear that language, please don't be misled into thinking that I am a danger to you at all. But it is, the language is difficult because so quickly any label you use becomes laden with a bunch of stuff that you don't want to be attached to it. That's true of all labels across everything political.
Hey everyone, I'm not a witch. Kicking it old school, old political reference. Someone out there knows what I'm talking about. All right, anyway, Josie.
Yeah, just Joe, on that last point, like, yeah, try to recontextualize the definition. Sometimes it's harder to take older definitions and try to make them your own. So I think now that you clarified that definition, I think everybody here feels a little bit more comfortable. And I want to it matters, right? Language matters. But anyways, I think I want to piggyback on what you were saying about that. And I think it comes back to something we haven't discussed yet, is that sexual desire is on a spectrum. We have people who are asexual and ace, like part of that community, and then you have people who are hypersexual, right? That and both of those are completely valid. And I think that what we have to do is try to figure out that wherever you fall on that spectrum is completely valid and okay. And so for me, that's what sex positivity means to me, is that you take all people's sexual desires and be completely okay with it and be positive, be enthusiastic about people's lives and how they interpret those things. And so I wanted to bring back bring in being on that point, the idea that I'm a polyamorous person, right? So a lot of times in the way that I am seen is like, as a polyamorous person, I am seen as hypersexual. I'm seen as somebody who doesn't take responsibility as far as like sexual health. I cannot have deep forge relationships. And as a trans woman, whoo, there's an entire layer on top of that about being like, oh, you're just hypersexual woman because you're biologically a boy type bullshit that people would say as well. So there's like a lot of layers that also exist within the idea of like what that spectrum of sexual desire actually looks like for people. And I think when people start trying to say, okay, this range of sexual desire is okay, and this range of sexual desire is a little bit too far, so therefore we're going to try to hide that away. And I think when we talk about sex generally, we should accept everybody who falls within that spectrum. And when we're able to do that, I think that's when we're going to have the true like increase in people's understanding of like, oh, this person is like this person is like this, and then I can have sex with either of them. I know in the queer community, it's not a lot about penetration. Like we like, if you do oral, we count that as sex. At least a lot of my friends in my queer community, we say that because it's like, no, you got super intimate with somebody. It's like, if you can get an STI, that was sex. Like, that's a really good way to think about it, right? Like, it's like, if you can get an STI, then that is effing sex. Yeah, right. So I think that that's a way that we can look at it as well. But as far as like the pleasure aspect of like being a woman and like being proudly happy of like being able to say like, yeah, I freaking, I had a great night last night with that person I took home last night, or my fuck buddy over there, I went over to their house and we had an amazing time. Like, that's still seen as taboo, because it's like, wait, you just like did a one night stand and you're a woman? Oh my god, how terrible. And I think that's where feminism comes in. Is like, hey, like that, no, a woman can do that as just as much as a man can do that. A woman can have as many relationships as they want, as such as a man does. Like, so I think getting back to the general concept of looking at sex, at least sex drive and sex, desire on the spectrum, allows us to see like a more clear-eyed picture of how we view sex in general and how we put people into categories. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to just loop some things together in that.
So, do you think? I guess it's to Joe and to the rest of the panel, but like, because we don't have that conversation about female desire, we also don't talk about like what that a healthy desire looks like, right? Um, like I imagine that like how to express your desire, for instance, like what is a good way, like, so for men, right, like how to express your desire. Well, what doesn't include, putting your hands on someone without their say so, right? Like you can desire someone, but how do you interact with, how do you do that in a way that isn't destructive, right?
What? No, that's really
Being
subjective.
gay,
to not
being
put your hands
oh,
on someone, that's
No,
that's a
not
bad.
no.
oh,
I'm just saying. No,
how
you're.
to how to express desire.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, Josie? Is that expressing desire is subjective?
Well, the
Because we're
idea
kind
of
of
like healthy desire, like that to me, the word healthy desire. Now, in a criminal context, I get what you're saying, but everything outside of that is completely okay.
not necessarily. Like, okay, what I was gonna say was that being gay is really hard for just this reason. Because oftentimes, throughout our lives, and this is a really cis-normative perspective, and I realize that, but I'll go ahead with it anyway, and try to include, like, me being trans, so maybe it's not cis-normative, but anyway, growing up, I had a lot of opportunities to be close and nice with other little girls my age, or whatever the fuck I was. And not so much with other people of the opposite sex. So when I was overtly nice to people of the opposite sex, what normally happens in cisnormative relationships is that's clear that you're flirting. Well, what happens is when you're gay, you try to be really overtly nice with people who are your same sex, and for some reason the way that our society and our general grammar of social norms exists, that almost always doesn't come off as flirting. It almost always comes off as I want to be your best friend, because they assume if they are straight or if they don't know they're gay yet and you're like being gay, they'll assume you're straight anyway because that's the norm. So being gay is hard for just that reason. That's like one of the memes in the gay community, is that like when you try to flirt with a girl and you have no idea if she's flirting back, because the Western social norms of being flirty are just you're being really nice to somebody. And so then you have to gauge, like, oh my God, what if I touched her hand right now? Like what would happen? And so those are the kinds of gauges that we go through. And what pulls me to be like a gay auntie or whatever in the community is that because so many of us didn't survive the 80s in America, there's not a lot of like older, like pre-millennial gay people to like teach us how to be gay. That's like something I talk about a lot on stream, is that we don't have a lot of elders in our community right now. And so we lack a lot of that generational knowledge of like, okay, here's how gay people used to flirt. That's not really something that's been handed down very often. And so I do want to speak about that more openly and like be like, the auntie type for people. That's usually how I end up in my social life with younger people. But yeah, that's a whole meme, Prime, that you're mentioning.
Yeah, and you
I
did
mean,
a
it's
really good
it's
job
extra
of
fun when you're bi as well, like where you're just like, I am attracted to like all types of people, but like I find myself kind of I approach women differently than I would like approach men, and having to figure that out and like navigate it is, yeah, it's the worst.
Thank
And there's
you.
that whole
You're-
meme too about like it's I feel it's amplified in trans women, of course, but like there is that whole meme about fucking WLW being like fucking predatory and shit, like watch out men, the lesbians are coming for your wives, like careful, your wife might get a lesbian friend and turn into one. So that, like, I feel like there is an inner shame being a woman and being attracted to women, regardless of like whether you're trans or cis, although that is amplified if you're like a person whose identity is constantly made to seem like a monster. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean
Oh, I just wanted to say that you ladies were doing a fantastic job of expressing what I was trying to get at, and what this looks like relating back to experiences I've had, like a boy when I was young who was learning about his desires and apparently found me attractive, and it did not come out in a healthy manner. And in college, a woman who apparently was into me, had her desires, but like it did not come out in a healthy manner, like at all. These were, quite bad. But I think that's part of it, is that we're not expressing like, okay, here's how, like, you have these desires. It's good to have them. That's natural. But here's how that should interact with the rest of society, right? I don't know. Jack, and then Joe.
Yeah, I mean, like, as like a trans woman, I'm uniquely positioned to not have a single fuck how to like healthily like express desire, or and answer that question, like when we talk about like our elders, like it's what Johnny said is true. Like our elder generation, like keep in mind it's like one generation ago when like you could be arrested if you were in the wrong bar and police happened to raid the bar. You could be arrested if you were sitting in the wrong park next to somebody who was the wrong gender. You could be arrested. There were literally mandated clothing items that you had to wear, otherwise you could be arrested for being like perverting the public or whatever. And so like it's not a stretch to say that like our previous generation like grew up and the way they flirted was literally by going to jail. Which incidentally, that's why like police don't belong at Pride. Just incidentally, that's the reason. And so yeah, like how we express desire, it's actually a really interesting question for the LGBTQ community in particular, because we're basically forming our own language like right now. Like we're figuring out like what the cultural signs are, what the language is and how to pick up on it. And to Johnny's point, we're going to be the ones who kind of share that with the next generation via Tumblr or whatever Twitter too, if that happens. I don't know. But like yeah,
I'm getting married.
yeah.
You know, like the reason that we even have gay marriage, fun fact, is because of a case that went to the Supreme Court that wasn't about goddamn people getting married. It was about a real life situation that cis couples go through all the time, wherein a gay man who had been with his husband, this makes me cry every time I think about it, who had been with his husband for over 30 years, was trying to pay his husband's doctor bills as he was dying, and he couldn't because they wouldn't allow him to access his husband's fund because they weren't technically married, because it was pre-2006 in America. And so he almost went bankrupt and had to go all the way to the Supreme Court and justify gay marriage in order to even have access to pay hospital bills for someone he had lived with for 30 years. It wasn't even about gay marriage, but just these real life examples of queer people existing and then leading people into things like gay marriage, that's what benefits us. And because of things like the AIDS crisis, we have a lack of gay elders.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, no, go Josie, because it's on that point. Go on, go.
No, if you're gonna speak on that point, I want to speak on PrimeCayes' point of the conflation of desire and action.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly jump in because it's a different point to Prime, so maybe you can piggyback off mine, which is like, Prime, I don't know if you saw my face the second you said the word healthy, but it shirked the fuck up, because if there are three things that always concern me, it's legalizing, pathologizing, and moralizing. So in terms of healthy ways to express desire, so one of my best friends is a sex therapist by occupation, and she did her master's on the DSM and sexual dysfunction. And sexual dysfunction for men in the DSM is defined as not coming, right? Which changes the way we think about sex. Sex is then viewed with coming as the finish point always. So any sexual activity that doesn't result in that is now seen as dysfunction, right? So even in terms of like not this whole flirting thing, but sex itself, when you pathologize it or when you try and legalize it, enforces normative standards which we don't necessarily want. We want to evolve from, right? So I don't think that there is maybe there's a healthy way to express desire. Maybe there's a way that is better to express desire. I don't want to pathologize it or moralize it or legalize it, because unfortunately, social interaction is just a messy bed of fucking mistakes, and you're not going to be perfect at it immediately. There's no rule book. Like to me, and that's that thing again, right? Of like that sort of, and I'm not saying this of you, obviously. I'm saying the language that I find triggering for me is like anytime someone tries to gamify interacting with someone for a sexual outcome, it sounds incelly to me. Like, where's the rule book? What do I have to do to make her like me that's not creepy? Like, unfortunately, you have to fuck up and learn. So that's my point of view on it.
How many coins do I have to put into the friendship basket before I get the sex?
Okay, so that's not what I was referring to.
I think that actually...
That's not... Hold on. That's not... But that was not my... I mean, like... I'm maybe we're misunderstanding each other, and maybe this is to Josie's point, right? With the specific words that were used, And maybe because, desire and action, maybe I shouldn't be using those words there. But like with experiences that I had,
Healthy.
sorry?
It was healthy specifically that triggered Joe, she said. And so I think that's like the objective gamification she was kind of talking about, but obviously that's not what you were talking about.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
I said I wasn't targeting that at you, but
no, I
I'm
didn't
saying,
say
and
that. I didn't say.
I hear it.
Yeah.
I hear it on these panels from time to time, and it happens whenever we talk about sex. It's like, what is the way that you should interact with women? And it's like, it depends on the woman, the man. It depends on the individual person, and you're not always going to get it right because different people like different things. If you're looking for a rule book, then stay on the internet with your Reddit thread, because that's not how you interact with real people. You get to know them. You fuck up a bit. It's fine, because these are human beings, and that's how interaction works. We don't need to pathologize it. We don't need to legalize it. We don't need to moralize it.
So when people
Or they treat it as
violate,
like, oh, but like, how do you interact with women? As if women are this like very rare and exotic. Like, well, how do you do that? And it's like, you ask the questions about like, how do you meet friends? How do you like make a connection with another dude?
So-
Like, if you're not attracted to dudes, it's like we're people, and so like in order to like engage with women, I'd be like, well, how do you like engage?
I feel
with
like you're not
the
engaging
people?
with my ideas here. Like, all I'm trying to express here is that
Go
like
ahead.
this person, like, would people like violated my bodily autonomy? Like, if I described the situation, it was describing as someone violating my bodily autonomy, right? And it's a thing that happened to me, and it's like, fine, I'm not like traumatized or anything like that, but like, it's a thing that happened to me. They were clearly trying to express their desires. They clearly were not trying to hurt me, right? It was nothing malicious on their part. I'm not trying to, I don't know, but I'm just saying that like, if especially with the woman, like the boy who's younger, but for the woman, she was in college, and by that point, she should have known not to interact with me, interact anyone in the way that she did with me, but she didn't. And I'm trying to relate that to your previous point about like how women are not allowed to express her sexuality, right? How is so much taboo for them. So I'm thinking, like, trying to put myself in this woman's shoes that I had this interaction with in college, right? And thinking, well, she just, if she lived in a different world where she was had that training growing up, right? Like, or not training, experience growing up, being probably being allowed to express her desire, right? That we wouldn't have had that interaction. So I feel like this is something that we should be agreeing on, but maybe I'm just using the incorrect words here.
Yeah.
I think it was just a health thing.
Yeah.
Because like I'm not trying to like delegitimize your experience at all. And like I think like I have had probably more experiences that have resulted in like been based around someone touching me without my consent because they were into me before I was able to say no, then like I've had good interactions. So I'm not trying to delegitimize that. I'm saying don't pathologize it, moralize it, or legalize it, and that there's not going to be a rule book. So those mistakes are pretty much inevitable in society. And if you do try and make hard and fast absolutist rules, like don't touch somebody without explicitly asking for their consent, then you do this thing again of putting normative sexual ideas into the discourse when there are some people, it's like Carol Vance's danger pleasure continuum. Some women do like to be touched without being asked first. Some people like that.
Joe, you're kind of speaking around Prime, and if I could explain why, it'll take really quick. What Prime is really talking about is someone who had a sexual dysfunction, someone who was explicitly expressing themselves, and I realize that you're not talking about Prime. I realize that. That's why you're talking around him, but I think Prime wanted us to engage with that. Prime, you're talking about somebody who has a who had evidently a way of expressing themselves, but it was to express a dysfunction. And that's one axis that we haven't talked about yet, is when people express themselves and they express sexual desire in a way that in other forms may be healthy, but on another end of the spectrum may not be healthy. Okay. And what Joe is sort of talking about is that meta term, that healthy term, wherein if you say that something is explicitly healthy, then you mean that it is explicitly good. And we all know that that is not something that exists with people. And so what Prime is talking about is the axis of it was not healthy. You are talking about the axis of don't call things healthy. Okay, well, just because we can't call things healthy doesn't mean we can't identify things that are explicitly not good, like what Prime went through. Okay,
Sure,
just because
but
things aren't good for everybody, there are some things that are kind of bad for everybody, and we've identified them. And that's the axis Prime is talking about. And you're more, I think, talking about the meta of don't pathologize things and say that things are explicitly good for everybody. And they're just kind of opposites.
yeah, and I'm even like a little bit concerned by your use of the word dysfunction because, as I just said
Well,
before,
Prime
the
is talking
DSM
about
is
something. Prime is talking about something
Can
where he was assaulted.
can I
yeah,
solve this?
of course, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm a Me Too survivor myself. And it was awful. Now one thing is that I think that Prime was not talking about desire, but said desire when we're talking about assault and actions. When somebody puts their hands on you, when somebody assaults you, that is unhealthy behavior because that is an action on somebody else without consent. Now you can be extremely desired. You can desire as many people as you want and it be very healthy to have desires because you can't control your libido or whatever is issues. And I think that's what Joe's talking about, the idea of pathologizing like your attraction to multiple people or a lot of people or just wanting to be out there and be hypersexual. And that's okay too. And that's completely valid as long as you have the self-control, which is what everybody has. Like, you could love, cheesecake, but if you eat nothing but cheesecake, guess what? That's an unhealthy relationship with you and the cheesecake, right? So you can have, as long as you can moderate your actions and making sure that you're able to moderate yourself in that way, you can be able to do these things okay. And I always worry. People are like, well, why do you desire so many people, Josie? Like, why can't you just be happy with the people that you have and all of those type of things? And I've literally had a therapist tell me once, they're no longer my therapist, but when I came out to them as a polyamorous person, the first thing they started talking to me about was sexual health and explaining to me how it's dangerous to sleep with multiple people because she felt it was an unhealthy behavior for me to be polyamorous. And that is where I think Joe is coming from. That my natural sense of being polyamorous and wanting to have multiple relationships from time to time is an unhealthy behavior, which is not true. And I think that's where we need to make sure we divide that line because there's a difference between desire and action on those desires. And if somebody doesn't have the ability to moderate those actions, that's what we get raped from is people who don't
But
have the ability to do that. But yeah,
and I
I'm
see
sorry.
people's hands up, and I don't want to jump in, but I do need to just point out because the way this happens every time is baffling to me. That once again, a conversation about women's sexuality is about assault, trauma, and consent being the only framework through which we can understand a women's sexual experience and safety. Like, it's just baffling to me that we started the conversation being like, how do we get past consent and women's trauma? And here we are being like, oh, what do you do if you're violated? Will you ask for consent? It's like, it's just
That
fucked
house is
me.
on
It's
fire.
really,
That house is
yeah.
on fire, Joe. We're never going to get away from it until we can stop seeing 1 in 3 women getting raped in college, okay?
Of course, but
Like
consent doesn't lead to sexual safety either. You can consent to someone and someone can then fucking choke you and brutalize you after, and they have the fact that you said yes at the beginning. Consent is not enough. It is a bloated, overused term that does very little for women's safety, and if it did anything, then all these fucking consent is sexy campaigns we see everywhere would have minimized rape, but that's not the case.
I
Okay.
think we're conflating things.
Yeah, I think, and I apologize for expressing that thought in the manner that I did because apparently it's derailed things, and I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to express something, but maybe I just used poor wording. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. But okay, Jack, and then Amanda.
So I was just gonna ask Joe if mainly what we're hung up on here is like semantic differences between like the use of the term unhealthy and like causing direct harm, like touching somebody inappropriately would be like harmful to them if they did not want it, and would like phrasing it differently make that more acceptable, or are we talking about I just wanted a little
Yeah,
clarification on that.
I said originally that I find the word healthy concerning. So that was an issue with the word itself. And I thought I was
Okay.
clear about that, but perhaps not. I find that, yes, touching someone without consent is, in your case, Prime, in a lot of cases I've been in, was harmful. But I don't think you can create an absolute rule about touching someone without asking for permission first, because circumstances and individuals change whether or not that causes harm. So my issue with that is I don't think, once again, that sexual interaction between two or more parties can be reduced down to an issue of consent as the only safeguard we have for preventing harm.
Okay, so there was that, and then I just wanted to just. It felt like we were all like a lot of us jumped in to talk around and about Prime's experience, and it felt really unfair just to you, Prime, and I just wanted to say sorry that happened.
Yeah, but sorry, I didn't want to make this about me. I was just no. That really was not my goal, and it seems like I've done that, and that was not what I brought that up for. It's simply that an experience I could draw from to add to the conversation. But it looks like I've derailed things. I didn't want to do that. I actually really want to talk about Joe's topic about desire. I think it's super interesting, but it looks like I've derailed things in a way that I
No,
didn't
it's not.
intend.
It's not your
No.
fault.
Yeah.
We got
sorry.
lost in the weeds of
Hey,
semantics. I think.
Amanda?
Hey, friends.
Yes. So I don't know if I'm derailing the conversation here, but I just wanted to say that, like, so with the whole rules, like, we shouldn't be doing, legalizing and things like that. I think we can all agree that there is a rule, and that would be respect, right? Like, the respect is kind of key here. And then on top of that, when the kind of the jump on Prime happened, it was in regards to how do I talk to women, and then turned into something that, like, I am going to push back on, because as a woman who I have those exact same questions when it comes to making friends. So I'm neurodiverse, so I have way different ways to communicate with people, and I'm constantly having to know and relearn how to interact with people. This entire Twitch platform to me and Discord is super new, that, like, I'm afraid of it because of the fact it took me almost 30 years to learn how to interact with people in friendship manner, in desire manner, and now I'm having to do this in a virtual manner. And so Prime wanting to know how, or like associating that with wanting to, how to interact with women, I don't think that should have been anything to jump on him for. I think we all have that in some form.
Thank you. Marcy, please.
Okay, so I have to go because I have to go pick up my partner from work. But I just want to close some final thoughts from me on this subject. I do get tired. In Prime, I don't think this is what you were doing, but I do think that there's an element of truth to the fact that, on these Twitch panels, whenever we talk about sex or sexuality or anything like that, we do kind of take it at this we have almost like a market mentality around it, where we treat sex like, well, if I give you X disclosure about my penis, and you give me X disclosure about your vagina, and we make this trade in the sexual marketplace with the X consent factor storm for Y. I feel like we intellectualize it a lot more than would happen a lot in the actual sexual situation. But I don't think that's what you were doing. I just something Joe said reminded me of that. Also, I do agree that I think we pathologize things a little bit too much in terms of fucking sex. It was only very recently that certain sexually I don't know what the term would be, sexually divergent activities like homosexuality and being transgender. It's not a sexual thing, but it was considered one for a long time. All of these things were taken out of the DSM, right? So I do think there's some truth in the fact that we shouldn't necessarily pathologize behaviors. Behaviors that are harmful because they do harm, and not because there's something inherently wrong with exploring human sexuality. Also, yeah, consent is important, but I don't know. Joe, I'd love to talk to you sometime about this because this seems like a really interesting, nuanced like subject that I don't think I'm capable of fully understanding in in like a 3-hour panel. So yeah, it's great to be here, everybody. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.